The silence in the small town of Goshen, surrounded by orchards, was shattered when police officers discovered a lifeless man on the bathroom floor, Daniel Green. On February 6, 2015, at noon, his colleagues became concerned when he didn't arrive for his shift and went to check on him. What they found was shocking. Daniel, just 31 years old, had been shot 4 times, with 1 bullet striking his forehead. Neighbors reported not hearing anything unusual. There were no clues to identify the shooter. There was no weapon, no DNA evidence. It seemed the perpetrator had meticulously covered their tracks. Daniel Green spent his entire life in Goshen. He worked for 11 years in the California Police Department and earned the respect of the town's residents. Passionate about his job, he always wanted to make a positive impact on the community, where everyone knew and trusted each other. Tragically, it was here that his life came to a sudden and harsh end. The police launched their investigation, quickly turning their attention to Daniel's personal life. Since his divorce from 27-year-old Erica Sandoval, he had been living alone. Their relationship was complicated. Even after separating, Erica continued to meddle in Daniel's life, trying to control him despite their official split. On February 6, 2015, Erica showed up at the scene shortly after receiving a message from a friend. She entered the house, crying uncontrollably in front of the officers. She claimed that she hadn't seen Daniel that day and was not involved in the incident. However, her actions raised red flags for the investigators. She arrived too quickly, displayed excessive emotion, and there were many unanswered questions surrounding her involvement. The death of Officer Green impacted the Tulare County Sheriff's Department profoundly. His colleagues began to question whether his tragic end was connected to his work or if it stemmed from personal issues. As the questions multiplied, one thing became clear: these mysteries needed to be resolved quickly. Investigators meticulously examined motives, connections, and personal conflicts, ensuring that no detail was overlooked. Matt and Misty, Daniel's twin siblings, were deeply affected by their brother's loss. They grew up in Porterville, a small town in California, where they shared a dream of working in law enforcement. Matt initially joined the police force but later shifted to a career in law. In contrast, Daniel remained dedicated to his role in law enforcement, advancing to the position of officer and taking pride in his chosen path. Their sister consistently supported them and felt proud of her brothers. Daniel Green was known for both his career in the police force and his love for motorcycles. He was a member of a motorcycle club, where he enjoyed the thrill of riding and the feeling of freedom it provided. A close friend of his, James, often joined him on rides through the countryside, cherishing those moments on the road together. Daniel's personal life was quite active. He enjoyed dating and rarely spent time alone. For a while, he would frequently arrive at family events with different girlfriends each month. This pattern continued until late 2009 when he met Erica Sandoval, a 22-year-old nurse. Meeting Erica changed his life completely. He fell deeply in love and decided to take a step towards settling down. At that point, both of his siblings were already married, while he had been single. However, with Erica, it felt different. Daniel was truly captivated by her. A close friend of Erica revealed that Erica was very much in love with Daniel at the start of their relationship. Their connection was strong, and they initially appeared to be the perfect couple. However, Daniel's sister observed that although Erica was generally friendly, she could quickly become upset if things didn't go as she wanted. As time went on, stress accumulated in their relationship, leading to regular conflicts and arguments. Erica grew up in Southern California in a middle-class family. She had a brother who recalled that Erica, as their parents' only daughter, always felt special. Her parents pampered her, striving to provide her with the best of everything. As a result, Erica never faced hardship or mistreatment. She came to expect that her wishes would be met without hesitation. With the constant support and attention from her parents and brother, she developed a sense of entitlement and believed she deserved special treatment. Daniel Green, 26, and Erica Sandoval, 23, shocked their family and friends by secretly getting married in Las Vegas. They didn't inform anyone beforehand. Daniel's brother and sister were taken aback when they received a late-night message that included a photo of the marriage certificate. A few weeks later, the couple hosted a small celebration for their close friends, where Erica wore a white dress and Daniel donned a black suit. Despite seeming happy, Daniel and Erica's relationship was not perfect. A friend and fellow motorcyclist of Daniel's recalled that even before they got married, they had a serious fight where Erica used a razor to damage the furniture in Daniel's home. His friend considered this a troubling sign that should not have been overlooked. Daniel's brother, Matt, also saw the damage firsthand and was worried, but Daniel dismissed it as just an emotional outburst. Tensions continued within the family. During one argument, Matt and their sister heard Erica shouting at Daniel from another room and saw him break down in tears. Matt described it as one of the most painful moments of his life, feeling devastated to hear his brother cry. Intervening in Daniel and Erica's relationship was challenging. The Green family faced tough times growing up. Daniel's brother and sister recalled how they, along with their mother, suffered from their stepfather's abuse. He had a criminal background, drank heavily, and used banned substance. To shield their younger sister, Matt and Daniel, being older, often took the worst of the abuse. Eventually, their mother obtained a restraining order, and shortly after, their stepfather died. These experiences deeply affected each of them. Daniel's relationship with Erica mirrored the troubling dynamics of his childhood. Family members observed that Erica exerted control over Daniel, isolating him from friends and family while also belittling him verbally. Even though Daniel was a police officer who frequently dealt with victims of domestic abuse, he struggled to acknowledge that he was in a similar situation. He realized he was becoming a victim but felt powerless to change his circumstances due to fear, shame, and a reluctance to admit weakness. Just like women, many men often do not report domestic abuse for these same reasons. The problems in Daniel and Erica's marriage escalated in February 2011 when a neighbor witnessed a heated argument between them. Erica was shouting and provoking Daniel, pushing him to his limits. He tried to maintain his composure, aware that losing control could jeopardize his career. In a moment of desperation, he asked the neighbor to call emergency services to intervene. The police arrested Erica, but despite the seriousness of the situation, Daniel chose not to press charges, resulting in her quick release. This incident marked a turning point for Daniel, leading him to decide that their relationship was over. In January 2012, just a year after their official marriage, they divorced and separated. A few months later, Erica informed her friends that she was pregnant with Daniel's child. The news reached Daniel, and despite their past issues, he decided to give their relationship another chance for the sake of the unborn baby. They got back together, moved in again. Daniel's family hoped that this time would be different, that their conflicts would be resolved. He made an effort to keep the peace at home and looked forward to the baby's arrival. However, the issues persisted. Erica frequently confided in her friend about Daniel's harsh behavior. She described Daniel as cold and indifferent, expressing her unhappiness in the relationship. Her friend recalled Erica saying that Daniel had once grabbed her by the neck and attempted to choke her, which made Erica fear a tragic outcome. Daniel's relatives and friends described Erica as having aggressive behavior. She damaged furniture by slashing mattresses and sofas, which exemplified her lack of control. Their conflicts grew worse each month, yet neither side reached out for assistance. The relationship remained unstable, leading to increased tension. Despite attempts to maintain family unity, Daniel and Erica lived in a state of constant stress. Friends and family observed that their relationship had turned into a harmful cycle where both individuals were suffering, but neither was willing to make changes. They kept their issues hidden, avoided seeking help, resulting in a pattern of mutual blame and pain. On January 5, 2013, Erica gave birth to a son whom they named Aiden. At that moment, their relationship seemed to finally be improving. Daniel was thrilled to become a father and felt that his life had new meaning. For the sake of his family, he decided to sell his motorcycle, understanding that the safety and well-being of his loved ones were more important. This decision was not easy for him, but he did it for Aiden and for the stability of their family. Daniel posted pictures with his son on social media, capturing moments of joy and his happy life. However, just 6 months later, the tension started building again. The constant conflicts, arguments became more frequent. Daniel suggested that Erica move out, and she agreed, but she took Aiden with her, completely cut off contact with her ex-husband. Unable to see his son, Daniel fell into a deep depression. He decided to fight for custody of Aiden, which led to the start of a serious conflict between them. These events took place alongside another significant incident in Daniel's life. Just before Aiden was born, Daniel was on a motorcycle ride with a friend when his brakes suddenly failed. They stopped to check, and Daniel found that some wires had been cut. He immediately suspected Erica might be involved. When he got home, he confronted her, but she denied any wrongdoing and claimed she would never endanger his life. Erica disapproved of his motorcycle riding, seeing it as dangerous. Their arguments increased after the brake incident, creating more tension in their relationship. Daniel chose not to involve the police and kept the incident to himself to avoid drawing escalating conflicts. He recognized that their situation was becoming unhealthy, but he decided to stay silent in hopes of managing the fallout. After selling the motorcycle and welcoming the birth of his son, Daniel hoped for a calmer period in their family life. However, conflicts and tensions persisted. In the fall of 2014, during another night spent together, Daniel experienced a frightening incident that shook him deeply. In the middle of the night, he suddenly woke up to find Erica standing over him with a gun. She pointed it at him, claimed she had a nightmare in which he had been unfaithful. Erica expressed her desire to end his life to escape the pain of betrayal. Daniel calmed her down by reassuring her that it was just a dream and that he had always been faithful. After she lowered the gun, Daniel realized how dangerous their relationship had become. He shared the incident with his friends and concluded that it was time to end the toxic relationship for good. In January 2015, despite previous conflicts, Daniel and Erica came together to celebrate their son Aiden's second birthday with close family. During the gathering, they appeared to be friendly, leading some to speculate that they might be rekindling their relationship. However, Daniel was aware that a future with Erica was not feasible and wanted to avoid their past disagreements. Following the celebration, Daniel informed his friends about his new girlfriend, a 20-year-old named Brenda Vela, and shared a photo of them on social media, revealing his happiness. Many people were optimistic that he was starting a more peaceful chapter in his life. Erica and Daniel's relationship had been marred by conflict, mutual blame. Their text messages were filled with hostility, including hundreds containing anger and insults. Daniel accused Erica of trying to take his son away from him, while Erica accused him of being selfish and unfit father. Their arguments covered topics from parenting to personal attacks. There was no constructive communication, only increasing tension. On the morning of February 6, 2015, Daniel dropped Aiden off at Erica's house as planned and then went to the gym. After working out, he returned home, where a tragic event occurred. Daniel entered the bathroom, sat down, and was shot 4 times in the arm, chest, neck, and forehead. He died instantly, with no chance to protect himself. The day after Daniel's death, Erica was brought in for questioning. She insisted she hadn't visited his house in weeks and had no connection to what had happened. Investigators, however, told her they had surveillance footage from a neighbor's camera showing her entering the house on the day of the incident. Although the video did not clearly identify her, the investigators used this information to pressure her. The tactic worked. Overwhelmed, Erica confessed and even revealed where she had disposed of the firearm involved in the crime. The prosecutor claimed that jealousy and a fear of being replaced by another woman motivated the crime. When Erica was arrested, police discovered a note in her purse with Brenda's name and birth year, suggesting Erica had been monitoring Daniel's new girlfriend. The evidence against her was strong, but the trial didn't begin until October 1, 2019, 5 years after the incident. Erica made about 170 phone calls to Daniel in an effort to reconnect after she found out that he had introduced their son, Aiden, to Brenda and that they were spending time together. This prompted Erica to lose control. The prosecutor also mentioned that after the crime, Erica deleted several messages from Daniel's phone where she had tried to persuade him to believe she would change and improve. However, Daniel made it clear that he wanted nothing to do with her. He intended to move forward with his life. During the trial, Erica's lawyer argued that Daniel had been an abusive husband who repeatedly attacked her. They presented audio recordings of their intense arguments, where Daniel could be heard insulting and threatening Erica. These recordings were vital to her defense, highlighting the aggression and cruelty in their relationship. In court, Erica detailed the abuse she suffered over the years. She stated that Daniel physically assaulted her, choked her, and made threats against her. Erica explained that she lived in constant fear and refrained from reporting the abuse to the police because she felt it would be pointless. She believed that, as a police officer, Daniel could sway any investigation and that he was too powerful for her to seek justice. Erica also thought that people would not believe her because Daniel was well respected in their community. On February 5, 2015, the day before the incident, Erica said she had a phone conversation with Daniel. During their conversation, they flirted, which gave her hope of rebuilding their relationship. The following day, she decided to visit his house to see if they could reconnect. Upon entering, she noticed 2 firearms on the table, which made her feel uneasy. Curious, Erica explored the house further and discovered a partially open safe in one of the rooms. Inside the safe, she found 2 intimate photos of individuals who she believed looked underage. This discovery shocked her and made her worried that Daniel could be a danger to their son. Erica said that seeing the photos changed how she viewed Daniel. She recalled how he had made her wear school uniforms and started to realize that his interests might be more sinister than she had assumed. After putting the documents away, Erica heard a car pull up. It was Daniel. In a panic, she grabbed 2 loaded guns and hid in one of the rooms, unsure of what to do next. When Daniel entered the house, he moved through the rooms. Erica heard him go to the bathroom, and with the guns in her hands, she followed him, filled with fear. When she entered the bathroom, she found Daniel sitting on the toilet. He saw her and shouted angrily, threatening her. At that moment, she claimed she started shooting. She couldn't remember how many shots she fired but kept shooting until she felt safe. Then she ran out of the house, disposed of the guns, and attempted to escape. Erica revealed that she continued to have an intimate relationship with Daniel despite his mistreatment because she was afraid of how he would react if she refused him. She believed that not meeting his needs would lead to his aggression. This fear was a significant reason for her staying with him. She felt that her safety depended on obeying his demands. During the trial, Erica spoke for the first time about finding photos in Daniel's safe. She explained that she had kept this information to herself during the investigation because she did not trust the authorities and thought they would side with her ex-husband. Daniel's family was shocked by her allegations and completely rejected them. Erica maintained that she was scared her concerns would be overlooked or misunderstood. However, her claims were not backed up by evidence. Officers who searched Daniel's home found no illegal photos or proof to support her accusations. The prosecutor argued that Erica's statements were false, intended to evade accountability. Erica's lawyer attempted to paint Daniel negatively by highlighting that his phone and computer had hundreds of explicit photos and videos featuring adults. Additionally, the lawyer mentioned that Daniel had deleted over 1,000 images from his phone years ago, suggesting that this could imply he had troubling secrets. Erica may have had valid reasons to be afraid of him. She expressed sorrow for her actions and apologized to Daniel's family, stating that she never intended for things to end so tragically, that her actions were motivated by panic and fear for her son. Erica's attorney argued that the responsibility for Daniel's death was not only on Erica but also on Daniel himself. They were caught in a traumatic relationship that neither could escape, leading to a tragic outcome. The jury deliberated for nearly 4 days but couldn't reach a unanimous verdict, resulting in a mistrial. Erica's attorney viewed this as a positive outcome, as it allowed them to reevaluate the case and plan a new defense strategy. Nevertheless, Erica lost her parental rights, Daniel's brother, Matt Green, and his wife adopted Aiden. Erica Sandoval's first trial in 2019 ended with a hung jury. The next trial begins on February 6, 2025, exactly 10 years to the day after the crime was committed. Jury deliberations began on Tuesday, May 6, 2025. On May 8, 2025, Derica was found guilty of first-degree murder with the special allegation that she personally and intentionally discharged a firearm, causing serious bodily injury to Daniel. Sandoval's sentencing is scheduled for June 5, 2025. The trial is taking place in Room 20 at the Southern County Judicial Center in Porterville, where Sandoval faces 50 years to life in prison. Specifically as follows: she could be sentenced to 25 years to life for the murder charge and an additional 25 years to life for the weapons charge. Sandoval has served 10 years and may be eligible for an elder parole hearing when she has served 20 consecutive years and reached the age of 50. This tragedy has highlighted the destructive potential of jealousy and personal struggles when individuals don't seek help or end toxic relationships in a timely manner. Many lives have been shattered, causing immense pain and leaving many things unsaid. Nevertheless, there are still people who are fighting for a better future, striving for Aiden's happiness. While the story may have reached its conclusion, its impact will linger, reminding us of the hidden struggles that can exist behind the facades of seemingly perfect homes. Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case, the case of Matthew Terry. A woman called 911 from Lithia, a suburb of Tampa, Florida. She reported hearing screams from a nearby house and discovered an injured woman with a severe neck wound, bleeding heavily and struggling to breathe. It seemed that the attacker may have escaped into the woods upon hearing someone approaching the house. To start, let's get to know Kay Baker, a resident of Lithia, Florida, where she lives with her two sons. Kay Baker, 43, is a third-grade math and science teacher at Cypress Creek Elementary School in Ruskin. On the night of May 28, 2022, which was a quiet and warm evening, her neighbors, Jonathan, was sleeping peacefully on his sofa while his wife and children were also fast asleep. Shortly after midnight, Jonathan was startled awake by sounds that he later described as a scream, the sound of someone falling to the floor, and the sound of someone choking. Initially, he thought one of his daughters had fallen out of bed, so he went upstairs to check, only to find that everyone was still fast asleep. Jonathan decided to investigate the sounds outside and discovered a woman lying face down in his front yard. This woman was later identified as Kay Baker. She was in a pool of blood that appeared to be coming from her neck. While Jonathan checked on her, he heard a noise behind him. He turned to look toward the rustling in the woods behind his house but saw nothing. He then asked his wife, Ruth Figgins, to call 911. Unfortunately, by the time rescue workers and deputies from the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office arrived, Kay had already died. Medical examiners at the scene found multiple stab wounds on her shoulders and neck. The cut on her neck was so severe that detectives believed the attacker intended to behead her, describing it in their reports as almost decapitated. The police searched the area around Kay's house and spotted a gray Ford Focus parked in the driveway. They checked the license plates and confirmed that the car belonged to Matthew Terry. One of the windows in Kay's house was open, and its screen had been removed. This window was in a room used by one of Kay's sons, but neither son was home that night. The window faced the Jonathan's house. A right turn from the window led to the neighbor's front yard where Kay was found, while a left turn led to the backyard, which had drops of blood. Detectives quickly secured a search warrant to enter Kay's house. Inside, they noticed that one knife was missing from the kitchen's meat-cutting set, and a mobile phone was still there. The missing knife was a bird's beak, named for its shape and used for peeling vegetables. The bathroom door frame showed significant damage, suggesting that someone had forcefully broken into the master bedroom, where more recent evidence was also found. Signs of a break-in were evident on the nightstand, where another mobile phone was discovered. They then called in a handler with a dog to track a scent. After some time, the dog led a sheriff's deputy to a wooded area where they found a patch of grass soaked with blood. Realizing the perpetrator might be nearby, the authorities decided to bring in another canine unit with a Belgian Malinois, known for its ability to apprehend criminals. The sheriff's deputies took the dog to the blood site and warned that they would release the dog if anyone was hiding, and did not come out. Shortly after, the dog began barking and tried to rush forward. The police soon discovered Matthew hiding in tall grass and bushes. He was only wearing a t-shirt and underwear, and his clothes were covered in blood. Matthew had injuries on his neck and struggled to walk. After a struggle, the police stopped the pursuit, and he was arrested on a charge of first-degree murder. May 27, 2022, marked the end of the school year, providing a perfect reason to celebrate. That evening, Kay went to a grill bar with her boyfriend, 47-year-old Matthew Terry. While at the bar, they both got up to use the restroom. Kay returned first and accidentally bumped into her friend Kelly Andrews. Overjoyed to see each other unexpectedly, Kay started dancing happily. As Kay danced, a man neither she nor Kelly knew walked by and made a joke about their celebration. This interaction lasted about 4 seconds and occurred just as Matthew was coming out of the restroom. Matthew assumed that Kay was dancing with another man. At the bar, he confronted Kay, angrily accusing her of dancing with a stranger. Kelly and other regular customers overheard their argument. After that, Matthew and Kay left the bar and headed home. It was around 11:30 p.m., and the drive would take over an hour, during which Matthew continued to argue about the dancing. Frustrated, Kay called Kelly and asked her to clarify that she had not danced with the stranger. Kelly then told Matthew to stop being unreasonable. After the phone call, Kay texted her friend to say she was okay. About 30 minutes later, Kay was found in Jonathan's yard, covered in blood. Investigators believe that Matthew was trying to kill Kay. In a drunken rage, he reportedly stabbed her multiple times and attempted to cut her throat. Kay managed to escape through a window and ran into her neighbor's yard. It's important to note that Kay was not Matthew's first victim. He had a history of violence against women. Matthew had been in a relationship with Michelle Rogers. They met in 2015 through a mobile app while both living in Michigan, where Michelle was with her 5-year-old son. After a brief acquaintance and several months of dating, Michelle decided she wanted to end the relationship until she found out she was pregnant. For the sake of the child, she thought it was best to reconcile with Matthew, and after some time, they began living together. However, Michelle quickly became evident that Matthew was a violent person, and his behavior worsened when he was drunk. One time, he threw a cast iron skillet at Michelle while she was holding their young son. On another occasion, Matthew picked up her cat and threw it against the wall. At night, when he was angry and drunk, Matthew would show up at their apartment and knock on her door, claiming he knew she was sleeping with another man and demanding to be let in. Once, he told one of his colleagues that he wanted to beat Michelle up. The colleague took Matthew's speech as a way for him to vent and didn't think much of it. Several months later, on March 17, 2017, it became evident how serious Matthew's threats were. That day, he went bar hopping with a few friends. By around 6 p.m., Michelle decided to go find Matthew, who was at a nearby bar. When she found him, he was noticeably drunk, slurring his speech and stumbling. Frustrated that he had gotten so intoxicated, Michelle left him at the bar and went home by herself. Around 8 p.m., Matthew knocked on the back door, and she let him in. He was very drunk, unable to stand or walk properly, and appeared upset, bordering on angry. After letting him in, Michelle returned to the couch where she had been sitting before. Meanwhile, Matthew went to the kitchen and seemed to be preparing a sandwich. From the couch, Michelle could easily see him as the kitchen and living room were quite open. Michelle was sitting on the couch watching TV when Matthew suddenly appeared from behind and approached her quickly and aggressively. Startled, she asked, "What are you doing? Oh my God, what are you doing?" Without responding, Matthew began to push her toward the front. In that moment, they both fell to the floor. While they were on the floor, Matthew tried to restrain Michelle and continued to hit her. As they struggled, Michelle attempted to break free and in a moment of desperation, screamed that she loved him and asked why he was doing this. Matthew responded coldly, saying, "You don't need to say anything to me. I am just going to kill you. I'm going to beat it out of you." Michelle continued to fight back and managed to get to her feet. However, Matthew struck her in the face multiple times with great force, knocking her down to the floor again. Despite her efforts to rise, Matthew jumped on her, using his full weight to keep her down. Her hands slipped on the blood-slicked floor, and it seemed she had a broken nose. Matthew then grabbed Michelle by the head and slammed it against the floor. Each time he did this, she felt darkness closing in around her, fearing he would knock her out. Michelle was in a state of confusion, thinking, "Is this really happening?" Her head was spinning, and she could hear shuffling noises coming from the kitchen. Suddenly, she felt Matthew approach from behind and stab her in the neck with a knife. Summoning her last bit of strength, Michelle managed to break free for a moment and noticed a door leading to the garage behind her. So Michelle was able to run to it and press the opener with her left hand to try to open the door and escape. The garage door began to open, but it was moving slowly, and she knew she couldn't crawl under it before Matthew reached her again. As she waited for the door to open wide enough, Matthew lunged at her once more, trying to stop her from leaving. They both fell to the ground, and by that time, the garage door had lifted enough for them to roll out onto the driveway. They rolled a bit on the driveway, revealing that Michelle was lying beneath Matthew. He was furious and had both hands on her head, striking it repeatedly against the cement. He still had the knife and stabbed her 3 times in the right shoulder. Throughout this, Michelle screamed for help. At one point, she heard voices from across the street saying, "Leave her alone." But later she couldn't tell who was speaking or what they were discussing. When Matthew lowered the knife, Michelle grabbed the blade and pulled it toward herself. At that moment, Matthew relaxed his grip, causing the knife to fall to Michelle's neck side. She hoped that without the knife, he would stop fighting, but he continued to struggle to get it back and kept hitting her head against the road. Matthew started biting Michelle, targeting her shoulder and then her left cheek twice in an attempt to make her release the knife. During the struggle, Michelle screamed for help, pleading with him to stop. Eventually, a neighbor called 911. When Matthew heard the sirens approaching, he released Michelle and ran back into the house. Michelle got up and seized the knife to prevent him from taking it back. Blinded by blood filling her contact lenses, she hurried across the street, following the directions of neighbors who were guiding her with their voices. As soon as Michelle crossed the street, she collapsed in her neighbor's yard. The police discovered Michelle lying in the yard after she had been attacked, suffering from bites, bruises, and multiple stab wounds. Fortunately, she survived but spent 5 challenging days in intensive care before she began to recover. Matthew faced attempted murder charges for his violent actions against Michelle. After his arrest, he reached out to an old friend, Kay Baker, to testify in his defense. Kay, who had dated Matthew nearly 20 years prior, eagerly agreed to support him in court. She informed the jurors that Matthew was honest and could be completely trusted. Michelle desperately tried to make Kay see the monster that Matthew actually was. During the trial, Michelle sent Kay photos of her stab wounds and wrote, "Please don't let this happen to you." But Kay saw in Matthew the man she had known back in those days 20 years ago when they were dating. She wasn't alone in her defense of him. Many of Matthew's friends and family were present in the courtroom, supporting him and shaking their heads in disbelief as they listened to Michelle's testimony. Matthew's lawyer managed to persuade the jurors that Matthew's attack on Michelle was an act of self-defense. The lawyer argued that, as a former Marine, Matthew was using his training to defuse a fight that Michelle had started. Ultimately, Matthew was sentenced to serve 3 to 10 years in prison for assault with intent to cause serious bodily harm. In a letter to the Michigan Parole Board, Michelle expressed her fear for herself, her family, and potential future victims, stating, "If he gets out, I am afraid for myself and my family as well as for the next victim. Society is in danger." Unfortunately, her concerns were ignored, and he served only 3 years before being released for good behavior, having also completed psychotherapy. During his time in prison, Matthew maintained contact with Kay, and after his release, he moved to Florida to start a new life with her. Back to the Kay murder case, Matthew claimed he was not guilty of Kay's murder. However, prosecutors believe that he killed her in a fit of jealousy, because he thought she was dancing with another man while they were at a bar. After Kay's murder, an investigator who was part of the team investigating the crime scene following Matthew's attack on Michelle told the press that Matthew Terry was a self-absorbed, manipulative murderer. The trial began in November 2022. Prosecutors worked tirelessly to convince the jurors that Matthew was responsible for Kay Baker's death and sought the death penalty for him. They also believed that Matthew attempted to take his own life after killing Kay. Matthew's lawyers tried to convince the jurors that he and Kay were attacked by an assailant whom Matthew could not identify, and that this perpetrator escaped through a window. The lawyers also argued that the police gave up the chase too quickly because they immediately assumed Matthew was the murderer, thus allowing the real killer to escape. Since the murder weapon was never found, Matthew's lawyers attempted to minimize the importance of the missing kitchen knife by arguing that it could not have caused the injuries to Kay. Matthew's lawyers also worked hard to keep Michelle's case out of the current trial, aware that it could negatively impact the jury's perception of him due to his past violence. However, they were not successful. Michelle was called to testify, and she described the attack she experienced in 2017, which likely influenced the jury's decision. In just 1 hour, the jury reached a unanimous decision, finding Matthew Terry guilty of first-degree murder. Instead of a death sentence, he was given a life sentence. In his final statement, the judge could not hide his emotions, saying, "Given what I've heard, I believe you should have been imprisoned in Michigan. If that had happened, Miss Baker might still be alive. Now, however, you are in Florida, and you will spend the rest of your life in prison. I find you guilty and sentence you to life imprisonment with mandatory statutory fees." The Matthew Terry case is not only a personal tragedy, but it also raises questions about how abusers are treated. Many believe that if the Michigan justice system had taken a more serious look at Matthew's past violent behavior, Kay Baker might not have suffered this fate. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Pamela Mastropietro. Pamela Mastropietro was born on August 23, 1999 in Rome, Italy. From a young age, she struggled with anxiety and gullibility. She had trouble interacting with her peers, and family issues only made things more challenging for her. However, in these difficult circumstances, she gradually began to find her strength again. As she grew older, Pamela exhibited some unusual behaviors. She faced emotional instability and had difficulties in school, even though she was intelligent. Over time, her self-esteem was severely affected, causing many difficulties in her life. Eventually, she was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. She hung out with a bad group of friends who introduced her to alcohol. Pamela quickly became addicted to alcohol because under the influence of this drink, she felt freer and lighter, temporarily forgetting her problems. Pamela's parents are very worried and want to help their daughter, but they cannot focus entirely on her because they have to work a lot. As a result, Pamela began to face more serious issues. Although she initially managed to address some of her problems, things took a turn for the worse when she met a 20-year-old man from Romania. This relationship raised red flags from the start. Unlike her previous friends, this new relationship led Pamela to engage in regular substance use. She ignored her family's advice and their worries soon became a reality. Pamela used substances only when she was with her boyfriend, but after a few months, he vanished, leaving her to deal with her problems alone. The situation worsened and led to a critical condition. Fortunately, her parents acted promptly. On October 18, 2017, 18 years old, Pamela was admitted to a rehabilitation center in Macerata for 3 months. Her parents, Alessandra Verni and Stefano Mastropietro, were shocked when they learned about their daughter's problem. They tried to help her in every way and hoped that after her stay at the center, she would return to a normal life. They believed that the center would closely monitor patients and restrict access to drugs. However, they were mistaken. In fact, she was only partially restricted and could leave the center at any time, despite the curfew. According to Pamela, she felt more comfortable there because there were other people going through similar situations. This made it easier for her to find understanding and support. On January 31, 2018, photos of Pamela surfaced in the media, just hours after her disappearance. At that time, she was in the final stage of a rehabilitation program and had developed friendships with the staff and other young residents at the facility. These friends were among the first individuals the police contacted after her parents reported her missing. They said Pamela's situation was worrying, suggesting she was struggling with addiction and her condition had deteriorated. Unfortunately, completing a rehabilitation program is unlikely to bring about positive change. Meanwhile, Pamela's parents reached out to several television channels to report their daughter's disappearance, urging the public for assistance and offering a reward for information. Concerns were mounting, especially as the police had not found Pamela in the 2 days since she was reported missing. A witness reported seeing 2 suitcases with a foul odor dumped next to a ditch near a house on Promisleni Street, a few kilometers from where Pamela lived. When the police arrived and examined the suitcases, they discovered the body parts of a young woman inside. DNA testing confirmed that the remains belonged to Pamela Mastropietro, and one of the suitcases was identified as hers. Pamela's parents heard the shocking news on the radio, but couldn't believe it until law enforcement officers visited them in the evening to share the tragic discovery. Her mother was extremely distressed. She had always hoped her daughter would overcome her struggles and achieve her dreams. Now those hopes were shattered. Police later discovered that Pamela had spent her final days at a rehabilitation center. This is where their investigation began. According to people at the rehabilitation center, Pamela had made plans to meet someone and intended to leave. Security cameras confirmed that she left the center in the evening, carrying a suitcase and possibly attempting to escape with her belongings. No one attempted to stop her. After leaving, she went to a nearby train station, where she was again caught on camera getting into a car with a local taxi driver, Lucky Awalima. The driver, a 45-year-old man from a neighboring area, reported that he had taken her to the station after she missed her train to Rome. He dropped her off and left, unaware of what happened to her afterward. Pamela then decided to contact another taxi driver, who was also later approached by the police. In a rush, he agreed to help her and took her to his home. The next morning, she missed her chance to board the train, so instead she requested a ride to a park in Macerata. There, she encountered a drug dealer from Nigeria named Desmond Lucky. The police spoke to him, and he said that Pamela had paid him with a silver necklace her mother had given her. After meeting with Desmond, she left the park and went to a pharmacy a few streets away. The pharmacist reported that she entered the store with a suitcase and purchased a syringe. Security cameras captured her image. Video footage showed a man following her, later identified as Innocent Osagale, a 30-year-old Nigerian citizen who had been in Italy illegally since 2014. He had recently dropped out of a refugee aid program and had become involved in drug trafficking. This made him the main suspect in Pamela's disappearance and other crimes. investigators feared she may have left with him, possibly intending to buy and use illegal drugs. The police quickly located Innocent's residence, which was just a few streets from the pharmacy. The Carabinieri arrived at Innocent's apartment but did not find him. Then, using luminol, they discovered more blood and clothing that matched the last clothes Pamela wore. Authorities believe both Pamela and Innocent were under the influence of substances. It is thought that he experienced a seizure and attacked her. A forensic report revealed disturbing details, with Innocent apparently attempting to destroy his DNA by thoroughly washing Pamela's dismembered body with bleach. The condition of the remains was so poor that it delayed the determination of the cause of death. He was unsuccessful in disposing of the suitcases containing the bodies. He was captured on surveillance cameras outside a nearby building. It was also discovered that he was not alone during this time. He arrived in a car with a taxi driver friend. This led to an expanded list of suspects. Subsequently, Desmond Lucky and Lucky Awalima were arrested on suspicion of being involved in the crime. Both were in the car Innocent appeared in, carrying suitcases, but they denied knowing about the body inside. Innocent was tracked down and arrested a few hours later. However, he consistently denied attacking Pamela, claiming that she died from a drug overdose. He stated that he handled the body out of fear of legal trouble and deportation. He believed that the quickest and most discreet way to dispose of the body was to put it in separate suitcases and throw them away. However, the police did not find his explanation credible. Pamela's parents have tried their best to refute bad rumors related to their daughter. They argued that Pamela's actions were influenced by her borderline personality disorder, which made it difficult for her to control her behavior. This led to bad habits and erratic actions. On her social media pages, she repeatedly stated that she was ready to quit prohibited substances when her real life improved, which she believed could be achieved with the help of others. However, during the investigation, it was revealed that she frequently left the rehabilitation center to seek out prohibited substances. At that time, items and bloodstains found in Innocent's house were tested in a lab, confirming they belonged to Pamela. Initially, Innocent denied any involvement in the incident, claiming that Pamela died from an overdose. He admitted to offering her drugs, but did not explain how she paid for them. Innocent also denied abusing her, but many did not believe him. Unfortunately, there was no way to confirm or disprove his claims, as the remains had been thoroughly cleaned, leaving no evidence. When asked about his friends, Desmond and Awalima, who were with him during the disposal of the body, Innocent gave very strange information. He stated that on the day of Pamela's death, these friends were at his house. He claimed he did not see anyone attack her and that he passed out during the party. When he woke up, Pamela was with him. This account contradicted his earlier claim that Pamela had died from an overdose. Additionally, bloodstains found at the scene contradict Innocent's claims. It is clear that Pamela was abused and murdered, making Innocent's testimony unreliable. Awalima and Desmond, who were also experienced drug dealers, were detained but denied any involvement from the start. They claimed they were not at Innocent's house during the murder and provided an alibi. However, it took a long time to verify this alibi, and they remained in jail as witnesses to support their claims could not be located. Investigators then reviewed call recordings and tracked the locations of Awalima and Desmond. It turned out that neither of them were at Innocent's house at the time of the murder. They were selling prohibited substance in another part of the city. As a result, the murder charges against them were dropped, but questions about their involvement in hiding evidence, and the body remained. Meanwhile, Innocent maintained that Pamela had died from an overdose and that he had no part in her murder. However, a forensic expert discovered 2 deep stab wounds to Pamela's liver. Given the nature of these injuries, it is suspected that they were inflicted intentionally to kill her, rather than as a result of handling the body. There were reasons to suspect that Innocent had abused Pamela while she was unconscious, which contributed to the tragic incident that followed. A toxicology report revealed that Pamela had a high level of illegal substances in her bloodstream. A forensic expert noted that this level should have rendered her unconscious at the time of her death, but it was unclear if the amount could have caused her death. However, detectives suspect he took advantage of Pamela, drugging her until she passed out and taking advantage of her while she was dealing with addiction and mental health issues. The case had a new lead when, while Awilima and Desmond were in custody, they discussed the incident that occurred at Innocent's house. Their conversations were recorded, and they talked about how Innocent had abused a girl who was unconscious on the couch. Despite the evidence, Innocent maintained that he did not kill Pamela, but expressed remorse to her family for his role in her accidental death. He claimed she died from an overdose, a statement that her parents found insulting. Innocent acknowledged that after Pamela's death, Awilima and Desmond continued to fabricate stories. By February 2019, a hearing was set to resolve Pamela's murder. At this point, investigations had established Innocent as the central figure in the prosecution's case. While in prison, Innocent revealed details of what had happened to Pamela to fellow inmates. According to one inmate, Innocent met Pamela in a park in Macerata, a known area for illegal activities. He quickly realized she was too trusting and carefree, which led him to exploit her naivety. Innocent quickly convinced Pamela to accompany him to his home, where he intended to use a prohibited substance. On their way, they stopped at a pharmacy so Pamela could purchase a disposable syringe. Innocent later confessed that when she lost consciousness from the use of the prohibited substance, he began to abuse her. However, one injection was not enough to knock her out, and she eventually woke up and tried to fight back. When Pamela threatened to report him to the police, Innocent became frightened, realizing he could face serious legal consequences. In a panic, he and his accomplice attacked her liver, causing her to lose a lot of blood and become unconscious again. Finally, he took steps to handle her body. A forensic expert later confirmed that Pamela had been severely injured and had died. The main witness for the prosecution provided statements that were supported by physical evidence and the testimony of a forensic expert, which was another blow to Pamela's family. Her mother had held on to the hope that her daughter had not suffered, but it was revealed that her death was both horrific and painful. A crucial piece of evidence against Innocent was skin found under Pamela's fingernails. She had fought back and scratched him, and he was unable to completely remove the evidence with bleach. Forensic analysis confirmed that the skin belonged to Innocent, indicating that there had been a struggle between them rather than a sudden death. Additionally, the testimony of Awilima, who had also been under investigation, was presented. He claimed that during the attack he received a call from Innocent. During the call, he heard the sounds of a woman crying and moaning in the background. Innocent had asked Awilima for help with something suspicious, but he declined. When he asked about the woman's screams, Innocent insisted he shouldn't worry about it, and then hung up. In April 2019, evidence and forensic examination results were presented in court, revealing the extent of the cruelty involved in the case. Innocent was identified as the person responsible for Pamela's death. The toxicology report indicated that the level of the prohibited substance found in her blood was insufficient to cause a fatal overdose. The most shocking aspect was how Innocent handled Pamela's body. He attempted to eliminate all evidence of his involvement by using a caustic cleaning agent on her body, including sensitive areas. What is worrying is that Innocent carried out the act methodically, suggesting that he had experience in disposing of bodies. This indicates that this was not the first time he had committed such a crime. On May 29, 2019, a jury found Oseghale not guilty of murdering Pamela Mastropietro, as well as abusing and hiding her body. He was sentenced to life in prison. The defense lawyers were dissatisfied with the verdict and filed an appeal, But on October 16, 2020, the life sentence was upheld. The situation regarding Innocent's accomplices, Desmond and Awalima, was complicated. They were involved in the case and likely knew about the two suitcases with a foul odor that Innocent had suddenly discarded in a ditch. It was clear that they were trying to hide something. Many people believed that they were at least partially responsible for concealing the body, but there was no direct evidence linking them to the crime. Consequently, Judge Marat officially dismissed the murder and evidence concealment charges against them. However, they were not released from prison because they faced charges of selling prohibited substances. Authorities found evidence of prohibited substance use and a significant quantity of prohibited substances for sale in their apartments. In April 2019, Desmond Lucky and Lucky Awalima were sentenced to over 8 years in prison. In memory of her daughter, Pamela's mother fulfilled the dreams Pamela never had the chance to fulfill. At the time of Pamela's death, she was only months away from graduating with a diploma in Social Security and healthcare. Pamela had always aspired to be a volunteer and help others. On September 9, 2020, her mother received that diploma in her daughter's honor. Every day, she remembers Pamela, who never got a second chance at a normal life and was tragically exploited by deceitful individuals, one of whom took her life so cruelly. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of India Chipchase. India Chipchase was born in 1996 in Northampton, England, into a loving family with 2 younger sisters and a younger brother. As the eldest daughter, she often helped her mother care for her siblings. Sometime later, her parents divorced and her father moved to Australia. Following high school, India enrolled in college to study medicine, inspired by her father's career as a doctor. However, during her studies, she began to question her decision and took some time to explore her true interests. She worked temporary jobs in bars and moved out of her mother's house. Her parents were supportive and did not pressure her, wanting only for her to be happy and pursue her passions. Ultimately, India realized that she did want to become a doctor, and her parents wholeheartedly supported her, believing she would thrive in the field. India was known for her intelligence, hard work, and compassion. India's personal life was going well. She had been in a relationship for several years with her high school sweetheart, Raikana, who was a well-known figure in the North. However, they broke up a couple of months before the tragedy. Despite the breakup, India and Raikana remained friends. Being a beautiful and attractive girl, India often drew the attention of many boys, which eventually caused her some issues. 3 weeks prior to the incident, she started dating a guy named Ivan Raihana, and her family approved of him. On the night of January 29, 2016, at around 11:30 p.m., 20-year-old India went out to a bar with her friends, where they enjoyed drinks together. During the peak of the fun, around 1 a.m., her friends lost sight of her. They assumed she went to the restroom, but even there they couldn't find her. The search in the bar was also unsuccessful. Then her friends thought India might have gone home. Unfortunately, none of the friends tried to contact her. In the morning, India's mother, Sue Chipchase, was unable to reach her daughter, which was unusual since India usually kept in touch with her parents. Concerned, Sue went to India's apartment but found it empty. Sue then called India's friends who had been with her at the bar, but they said they lost track of her around 1 a.m. and hadn't seen her since. Next, Sue contacts her boyfriend in India, who says he was at another bar with some friends last night. Even mentioned that he hadn't heard India's calls or messages due to the loud music. When he finally noticed 9 missed calls and 2 messages from India that morning and tried to call her back, she didn't answer. Ivan was unaware of India's whereabouts, which raised alarms for her parents. They feared something had happened to their daughter. Right away, Sue reported India missing to the police, and the police immediately began searching. India was declared missing. Over time, India's mother and sisters began posting information about her disappearance on social media in hopes that someone would respond. Detectives began their investigation at the bar, interviewing the staff and requesting surveillance footage. The staff members confirmed that they remembered India being there that night and noted that she was very intoxicated. Around 1 a.m., India went outside for fresh air, but the security guard refused to let her back in because of her intoxication, even as she insisted she wanted to re-enter. She mentioned that she wanted to go home, and the bartender assisted her by accompanying her to a taxi. However, when the taxi driver asked for payment up front after noticing her condition, India got upset and jumped out of the car. With no further options, the bartender returned to work. India then sat outside the bar, feeling very distressed and unsure of what to do. She tried texting and calling her boyfriend, but he didn't answer. The staff noted that they frequently dealt with similar situations and couldn't help every patron get home, which led them to refrain from intervening in India's situation. After a while, the security guard noticed a man approaching India. They seemed to be communicating well, and it appeared they were friends who had known each other for a long time. The man assured the security guard that he would take India home safely. India then accompanied him to a taxi, and they got into the car around 1:15 a.m. and drove away. After that, no one from the bar staff saw her again. Police reviewed the surveillance footage and confirmed that the staff accurately described the events. Detectives showed a photo of the man to India's family and friends, but they did not recognize him and were certain that India did not know him, which raised concerns. Investigators identified the license plate number of the taxi that India had taken with the stranger and contacted the driver. The taxi driver reported that when India and the man entered the car, the man asked to go to McDonald's, but later requested to change the destination to a different address near a gas station. When they arrived at that location, the man got out and asked the driver to wait for him for 5 minutes, to which the driver agreed. While the man went somewhere, India attempted to call her boyfriend, but he did not answer because his phone had died. India sent several messages to her friends, but they did not respond either. The man returned after approximately 5 minutes. He got back into the car and instructed the driver to take them to Stanley Road. During the ride, India occasionally fell asleep. The driver arrived at the destination around 1:40 a.m. India and the man exited the car and went in another direction while the driver drove away. The driver could not provide any additional information about her. On January 30, India did not come to work, even though she was scheduled to start her shift at 4 p.m. and had never been late or missed work before. Police reviewed the surveillance footage again for clues. One detective recognized the man who left with India, 52-year-old Edward Tenniswood. Investigators began to look into his background. They know that he had a criminal history of assault and abuse, and had recently been released from prison. In his youth, Edward stole a large amount of money from his father, which led to his father disowning him. After moving from London to Northampton, Edward faced challenges on his own and had no family support, which contributed to his reclusive behavior. Described as odd and quirky, he worked as an accountant, had never been married, and had no children. Acquaintances noted that he had no friends or girlfriends. For the past 5 years, Edward had been living in a rented apartment on Stanley Road. The neighbors described him as modest and quiet. Together with information from the conversation with the taxi driver, detectives were able to trace India's whereabouts and concluded that she had been staying at Edward's house on Stanley Road. They gathered enough evidence to obtain a warrant for his arrest. Less than a day after India disappeared, at 3:45 p.m. on January 31, the police went to his apartment. When no one answered the door, they forced it open. Upon entering, the police were horrified to find a girl's body on a mattress on the floor, covered with a sheet. She was already dead, the bedding was soaked in blood, and she had a head injury. The victim was identified as India. In the living room, they found a bottle of wine and more blood nearby. Edward was not at home, and his apartment appeared unusual. The furniture was covered in plastic, and newspapers were organized neatly on the floor. Additionally, there were many clippings of beautiful women stored in boxes. India's phone was discovered under the stairs, while her shoes and handbag were carefully placed in the next room. Edward's neighbor reported seeing Edward at night with a girl as they approached the house. The girl was very drunk and could hardly walk, and Edward was assisting her. The neighbor was surprised, as he had never seen Edward bring girls to his home before. Investigators began to locate Edward by examining his banking records. They discovered that he had checked into a hotel and had paid for his stay with a card, remaining there for the night. Around 7 p.m., the police arrived at the hotel and found Edward sitting in the lobby watching television and drinking. He was arrested, and Edward was shocked by how quickly the police acted. He was charged with the murder of India Chipchase. Edward had scratches on his hands and neck, which seemed to be defensive wounds from the victim. When he was questioned at the police station, Edward shared a surprising story about the events that took place. He said that one night, while walking down the street, he noticed a girl crying near a bar. Concerned, he approached her, stating that he couldn't ignore a distressed girl. According to Edward, they had a brief interaction during which a connection formed. She smiled at him and opened up. He offered to take her home, and they got into a taxi to head to her place. On the way, their feelings for each other grew stronger. So Edward invited her to his home, and India accepted. The taxi dropped them off, and the driver left. Once inside, India went straight to the bathroom while Edward poured 2 glasses of wine. When India returned, she was in high spirits, and they sang, enjoyed their wine, and laughed together. At one point, she stumbled and fell, hitting her head and sustaining a minor injury that bled but wasn't serious. They laughed it off, and their conversation was enjoyable. Later, they consensually engaged in intimate activity. India asked him to choke her, and he agreed. Wanting to satisfy her, he choked her more forcefully, which she liked. However, he lost track of time and kept his hands around her neck for too long, about 10 seconds, by his reckoning. As a result, India's body began to convulse, and she lost consciousness. Edward was drunk and didn't realize that she had died. He fell asleep next to her body and remained unaware of her death throughout the night. In the morning, when he woke up, he noticed that she wasn't breathing. He thought she might have had a stroke or a diabetic seizure. Edward attempted to wake her, but nothing worked. Instead of checking her pulse, he poured himself a glass of wine. He acknowledged that something was wrong but didn't want to face it. After finishing his wine, he decided to change her clothes to make India look presentable. Then, he went for a walk to clear his mind and get something to eat. Edward believed that by the time he returned, she would wake up and everything would be fine. He had barbecue and continued drinking, but his anxiety only increased. Eventually, he checked into a hotel to find some peace. At the hotel, he drank and tried to maintain a positive outlook, convincing himself that he was one of the best optimists in the world. To explain why his furniture was wrapped in plastic, Edward mentioned his struggles with obsessive-compulsive disorder. He was very particular about avoiding dirt and dust. He wore latex gloves to minimize the need to wash his hands frequently. Edward cut out pictures of beautiful women from magazines, most notably a famous model named Heather Stewart White, whom he was obsessed with. He claimed to have dated Heather in the late 80s and early 90s until she moved to New York. However, investigators were skeptical of Edward's claims about his relationships with women. Heather herself denied ever dating Edward and stated that she didn't know him at all. She also offered her condolences to the victim's family. The police suggested that Edward may have targeted India at the bar because she resembled Heather. The autopsy indicated that India died around 3 a.m. The cause of death was determined to be strangulation along with blunt force trauma to the head. The pathologist dismissed the possibility that India could have accidentally sustained such an injury from a fall and then sat and laughed afterward. It was a fatal injury. Furthermore, she had over 50 bruises, cuts, and scrapes on her body, suggesting she had been beaten. Experts also concluded that these injuries could not have been accidental. The toxicology report revealed that India had a blood alcohol level 3 times the legal limit. Edward's DNA was found under India's fingernails, contradicting the suspect's claim of a consensual relationship. Edward's trial began in July 2016. India's parents chose not to attend the proceedings because they couldn't bear to hear the details of India's murder. Edward's defense attorneys aimed to portray him positively, describing him as modest, quiet, and calm, with a good reputation at work. Edward and his lawyers claimed that India's death was accidental, asserting that their interactions were consensual and that he was not guilty. However, the prosecution disputed these claims, arguing that the injuries sustained by India indicated violence. They stated that while at his house, India refused to engage in intimate relations with Edward, which caused him to lose control. He then attacked her, strangled her until she lost consciousness, and began to abuse her. At some point, India regained consciousness and found him on top of her. She attempted to push him away and fought back, but he struck her on the head, likely with a bottle, resulting in her death. During the trial, 2 witnesses testified against Edward, revealing troubling information about him. One witness, a neighbor, shared that he had previously drunk with Edward at a bar. The neighbor recounted that Edward claimed he had been trained to kill with his bare hands while in the army, and that he struggled with post-traumatic stress disorder. The neighbor described an incident where Edward, after drinking, became aggressive. Edward lost control and attacked the neighbor, who had to hold him back as he started to choke him. The neighbor feared for his life during the encounter and decided to distance himself from Edward afterward. The second witness was a woman who had been attacked by Edward when she was a teenager. He grabbed her, began to strangle her, and attempted to kiss her. Fortunately, she managed to push him away and escape. Although she never reported the incident to the police, it left a lasting impact on her life, making it hard for her to trust and interact with men. When she saw Edward's face on television in connection with the case of India, she recognized him and decided to go to the police to share her story. Her testimony was crucial for the court, as it helped the jurors understand how a seemingly ordinary accountant could become a monster. Edward denied all witness testimonies. The prosecutor highlighted that Edward had intentionally given the taxi driver an address at the end of the street to conceal which house they were visiting, revealing his premeditated plan for the crime. Ultimately, the jury found Edward Tenniswood guilty. He will serve at least 30 years in prison for murder and 12 years for abuse, both sentences to run concurrently. At the age of 82, he would be eligible to appeal his sentence. During sentencing, the judge emphasized that this was a horrific crime, driven by the defendant's desire to fulfill his fantasies with a much younger and attractive girl. It was an act of extreme depravity. He assaulted India while S was incapacitated by alcohol, rendering her unable to defend herself. After being incarcerated, Edward reported to his lawyer that he was experiencing mistreatment and beatings from other inmates. He expressed feeling vulnerable and at risk. Despite filing several appeals, all of them were denied. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case, the case of Jamie Osuna. The police discovered the body of a woman in a hotel room. A few days before this, a man named Jamie Osuna had called his ex-girlfriend to confess to a crime, which helped the police capture a dangerous individual, later known as the Man with 1,000 Faces. Jamie Osuna was born on 1988 in Bakersfield, California, USA. His life was marked by violence and cruelty from the start. His mother became pregnant at 19 by her abusive boyfriend, who was 21. His father was physically violent towards his mother, causing hearing damage to him, the unborn child. When Jamie was born, his father abandoned him in the car seat because he wouldn't stop crying. Eventually, his mother left the abusive man and then met another man. They had another child, but both Jamie and his brother suffered abuse from this man, with Jamie enduring the worst of it. He was treated terribly. He was fed on the floor like a dog, tied to a tree, and physically punished. His grandfather wanted nothing to do with him, and his uncle often hit him with a brick, while his mother was consistently cruel. This led Jamie to harbor deep resentment towards her for not protecting him. He dropped out of school in the 9th grade and soon began displaying violent behavior. At 15, he attacked another boy, marking the first of several incidents that would land him in prison. When Jamie was 20, he attended a birthday party for a boy who was turning 16. At the party, he noticed his friend's mother, Joelele Castellano, who was a 37-year-old woman he found very attractive. During the celebration, Jamie got into an altercation with another boy and used a knife. Although the injury was minor, he was sent back to prison because he was on parole. In prison, Jamie started writing letters to Joelle. To his surprise, she responded, and they began corresponding. Despite having only met once at the party, Joelle fell in love with Jamie. Joelle was so devoted to him that she arranged for his release once he completed his sentence. She waited outside the prison for several hours, and when Jamie finally emerged, she was shocked to see that he had gotten tattoos on his face, including one that resembled the Joker's smile. Initially, this made her uncomfortable, but she soon accepted it. That night, they spent together in a hotel, and she became pregnant with Jamie's first child. Joelle felt very happy during her pregnancy and enjoyed being with the man she loved. However, after some time, Jamie began to reveal his true nature. Jamie had a keen interest in philosophy and psychology. Joelle encouraged him, suggesting that with study, he could have a bright future. However, things took a dark turn when Jamie began to show controlling and cruel behavior. He tried to dominate Joelle's every action, but she resisted. Their arguments escalated, eventually becoming violent. Despite Joelle being pregnant, Jamie showed no concern for her well-being. After their child was born, she reported his violent behavior to the police, which led to his imprisonment. Upon his release, Jamie pleaded with Joelle for another chance, and she reluctantly agreed. Unfortunately, he fell into banned substance use, and his violence worsened, culminating in threats against her. Once again, Joelle reported him, and he returned to prison. Jamie was released on Halloween night in 2011, but he had transformed. His face was covered in tattoos intended to frighten Joelle, who now wanted nothing to do with him. He began to harass her, making threats over the phone and stalking her from the shadows. This harassment continued for several days until Joelle contacted the police, prompting Jamie to go into hiding. One day, Joelle received a call from him. He confessed to attacking a girl in El Morocco Motel. Her name was Yvette Pena. Yvette had her first child as a teenager. Compounding her difficulties, her partner began to show inappropriate interest in her. Over the years, she struggled with substance abuse and encountered legal problems, resulting in the loss of custody of all 6 of her children. Following this, she moved into a poorly regarded motel, the only affordable option as she tried to overcome her addiction and hoped to reunite with her children. However, Jamie's actions created barriers to this dream. After Jamie reported an incident at El Morocco Motel to Joelle, she contacted the police to confirm if there was a report of an attack on a woman there. The police informed her that no such report existed, leaving Joelle feeling uneasy. She then called the motel to inquire about any similar incidents, but they declined to provide any information. A few days later, A staff member at the motel discovered a mutilated body in one of the rooms while cleaning. The scene was horrific, with bloodstains everywhere, indicating that the killer had been extremely brutal. The motel staff called the police, who remembered that Jamie had contacted Joel. So they reached out to her for a statement and assistance in locating him. With her help, they found Jamie hiding at his grandparents' house, where he was arrested and taken for questioning. During questioning, Jamie denied any involvement, claiming that he had called Joel just to scare her. He maintained that he had not killed anyone and only wanted to get his ex-girlfriend's attention to rekindle their relationship. The police found his story hard to believe, especially considering the timing while they awaited the coroner's report on the body. Jamie remained in custody. The woman's body was so badly mutilated that it took 8 months for investigators to receive the coroner's report. The examination revealed that she had been dead for 5 days before being found, which coincided with the day Jamie called Joel. Due to decomposition, the coroner faced challenges in the examination, but they determined that the woman had been assaulted with multiple stab wounds and cuts inflicted by scissors. The cause of death was asphyxiation, suggesting she was alive and aware during the attack. Additionally, male fingerprints and DNA were found at the scene. When compared to Jamie's DNA, they matched. Jamie claimed he had consensual contact with her that night, explaining the presence of his DNA, but the police did not believe him. He was then sent to prison to await trial. Even while in prison, Jamie continued to harass Joel. He sent her threatening letters written in blood and once mailed her a dead rat. He even discovered the address of the prosecutor handling his case and sent him several threatening letters as well. It was clear that he was not mentally stable. Jamie filed a complaint against Joel, claiming that she was abusive toward their son, which led the authorities to pass the complaint to the police, triggering an investigation into Joel. She was arrested, but a week later, it was concluded that no violence had occurred, and she was released. Despite this, Jamie had achieved his goal of making Joel suffer. The trial for Jamie began in 2017. Throughout his time in prison, he maintained his innocence, but 3 days before the trial, he gave an interview to a journalist who worked for a local radio station. She wanted to learn about Jamie's life. In the interview, Jamie appeared with numerous tattoos covering his arms, face, and neck, most of which imitated the character of the Joker. One of the last tattoos was a 5-pointed inverted star in the center of his forehead, a symbol known in pop culture as satanic. However, Jamie was never a Satanist, and of course the murder was not ritualistic. During the interview, Jamie, with an absolutely calm face, stated that he had taken a life and that his only motive was a desire to do so. He simply wanted to seize the opportunity. Jamie recounted horrific details that were not published, as the journalist and her editor came to an agreement that some things should remain confidential. She felt that these details were too gruesome and should not be revealed to Yvette's family. Thus, they only aired certain fragments of the interview, in which Jamie spoke about his childhood and not much about the murder of Yvette. Jamie mentioned that he had been interested in cruelty since childhood, starting with insects and rats. Once, when he was left home alone, a pet ended up in the freezer and later in the oven. He said that he derived a lot of pleasure from that day and realized that he enjoyed it. Cruel, horrific acts brought him more pleasure than anything else in the world. This seemed monstrous to everyone. He also mentioned that due to the violence of his stepfather in childhood, he lost the ability to feel pain and happiness. His classmates joked and told stories that made them laugh, but he couldn't even smile, even when he knew it was funny. He never felt the need to express this through a smile. Jamie also said that he did not feel joy when something good happened to him, such as receiving a high grade in school. He enjoyed feeling pain, as it pleased him. Besides, Jaime stated that Yvette was not his first victim. The previous year, he had killed a man and a woman. He did not provide any details, only stating that the woman was 32 and the man was 27, and that he had hidden the evidence very well so that no one would find out. He claimed that the events were intentional and that he left evidence on purpose so that he would be sent to prison, as he no longer wanted to be in society. He mentioned that there were other people like him who had been his mentors. He spent so much time with the corpse of one of his first victims that the body began to decompose. Jamie looked at the corpse to ensure that the image would remain in his memory for a long time. He also implied in the interview that his choice of victims was not based on age, gender, or occupation. What mattered to him was only that they were human. Jamie claimed that he did this by himself and was proud of it, regardless of the consequences. Perhaps one of the most important phrases he said was, "I have no sympathy. I am a sadist. I will do it again, again." The trial against Jamie began, and the prosecution presented a wealth of evidence, including photographs from the crime scene. Yvette's family was present in court and was warned that they would see some unpleasant images. Yvette's sister even said that it was impossible to identify Yvette's body in the photographs, and it still affected her. Despite being accused of a serious crime, Jamie laughed loudly, spoke with a smirk, and looked at Yvette's family without being able to behave seriously throughout all the court sessions. Of course, this is upsetting not only to the victim's family, but to everyone present. After many trials, Jamie's lawyer suggested a plea deal. If he pleaded guilty, he would avoid a death sentence, which would bring some relief to Yvette's family and others affected. March 28, 2017, Jaime Osuna pleads guilty to 6 charges. On May 14, 2017, during a hearing in which he taunted Yvette's family, smirking and rolling his eyes as they described the torment he had caused in their lives, Jaime was sentenced to life in prison without parole, along with mandatory rehabilitation therapy. He gave a thumbs up as Judge John S. Summers handed down the sentence. He agreed to the terms, believing that it would not significantly impact him. Jamie was then transferred to a state prison in Corcoran, located 350 kilometers from Sacramento, California. Everyone hoped this would be the conclusion of this tragic story, but unfortunately, it took a darker turn. While he was in prison, Jamie displayed violent behavior. He got into fights, harmed other inmates, and clashed with prison guards. As a result, he was deemed a threat to others and placed in isolation. Jamie spent 23 hours a day confined to his cell, with only 1 hour allotted for outdoor time when no other inmates were present. During that hour, he would walk in circles, which was his only way to cope with the situation. On March 7, 2019, he was assigned a new cellmate, Luis Romero, a 44-year-old man who had been transferred from another prison in California. Luis had a criminal history involving gang affiliations and the murder of a woman when he was a teenager. After serving 27 years in prison, he was close to being released. It remains unclear why he was placed in the same cell as Jamie. Just 2 days later, on the morning of March 9, only 1 inmate was found alive. When prison staff conducted a routine check at 7:30 a.m., they were shocked to find Jamie's cell drenched in blood. Luis's body was in a grotesque position, and Jaime wears a necklace made from the body parts of fellow prisoner. The walls of the cell were marked with red messages. "I am not crazy. I just think differently." And, "You will never be alone. You will never be sad. You can always dance with me." Jamie used a metal blade he had concealed in his cell to commit the violent act. It was revealed that the prison staff did not perform night patrols, which made it easier for Jamie to carry out his plan. Many were shocked not only by the brutality of the act, but also by the fact that a dangerous criminal was placed in a cell with another inmate after previously being in isolation. Justin Sterling, the lawyer representing Luis's family, filed a lawsuit against the California prison, arguing that an inmate known for his violent behavior should not have been housed with a cellmate. In court, Jamie proclaimed his innocence regarding the murder charge. At his lawyer's request, a psychiatric evaluation was conducted, leading to a diagnosis of an unspecified type of schizophrenia, antisocial personality disorder, and borderline personality disorder. Consequently, the court deemed Jamie insane and unable to stand trial, sentencing him to a psychiatric program at Salinas Valley State Prison for treatment before any trial could occur. Jaime Osuna is a cruel man with a harsh upbringing who has shown a desire to take lives from a young age. It's surprising that he was placed with a cellmate. Because of this error, another person lost their life. Although it could be argued that he had 4 victims, only 2 have been officially confirmed. Serial killers often exaggerate their victim count to feel more important or to instill greater fear. At present, there are no clues and no bodies have been discovered, so nothing further can be confirmed. Regardless, no one can deny the horror of this case. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Maria Trinidad Matus. Maria Trinidad Matus Tenorio was born on January 31, 1993, in Chucan, Puebla, Mexico, into a prominent family of lawyers. From an early age, Maria showed a keen interest in music, often singing and dancing at family gatherings. Her mother strongly believed that her daughter would become a talented artist. Maria often helps people in need and has a deep love for nature, especially the sea. She has tattoos on one arm representing the ocean, a snail, a crown, and a flower, while her other arm features symbols illustrating her free spirit. Maria is often photographed with a radiant appearance, and she loves to pose for the camera. She composes and performs songs, nurturing her passion for music. After completing high school, Maria enrolled in college to study classical music composition, vocals, and jazz. She began her artistic journey with a friend, and together they formed a jazz duo and started performing at local bars. While Maria's dreams were beginning to come true, her career faced significant challenges. At the age of 18, during a concert, a member of the band pulled her backstage and attempted to molest her. Fortunately, Maria escaped. She did not reveal the incident until July 2018, when she decided to share her experience on her social media accounts. Her post sparked a strong reaction from her followers and friends, and the attacker later apologized. That same year, she launched her music project. Her debut single quickly climbed the charts. Maria shared that the song brought back memories of sunsets in Tulum with a special man. She describes her project as inspired by her love of mermaids and the ocean. Incorporating elements of electronic pop and hip-hop, she fully immersed herself in this creative world, taking on the roles of DJ and dancer. As her career progressed, many recognized her as a talented artist. In mid-August 2018, she scheduled several performances in Mexico City, including at the Rockmore nightclub in Polanco and events at the Vasconcelos Library. However, before her tour began, she decided to take a vacation to fulfill her longtime dream of traveling and experiencing different cultures. Maria chose Costa Rica, a country known for its peace and natural beauty. On July 26, 2018, Maria shared a photo at the airport, saying goodbye to her loved ones before her first solo trip to Central America. Although she felt a little nervous, she was mostly excited. In her post, she expressed her joy at traveling alone and experiencing nature. After arriving at Juan Santa Maria Airport, Maria planned various activities and outings. During the first days of the trip, she met a young British woman, and they quickly became close friends. They spent time enjoying the beautiful scenery of La Fortuna San Carlos in Alajuela and the stunning beaches of Santa Teresa. Maria felt extremely happy and inspired throughout her vacation, sharing fun photos on social media, including moments of her swimming in the sea with her new friends. She shared photos and videos with her mother, showcasing her adventures and the sights she encountered. Everything seemed to be going well. The last text message Maria's mother received from her daughter was on the evening of August 4, in which Maria mentioned that she was going to a bar with her British friend. At around 3 a.m. on August 5, the girls left the bar and opted to walk along the beach in Carmen de Santa Teresa, northeastern Costa Rica. Strange men suddenly appeared in their path, apparently intending to rob them. The attackers seized the girls, but Maria's British companion managed to escape. She sought help from anyone nearby, including a security guard from their hotel. During the attack, one of the assailants threatened to kill Maria, pushing her into the water before eventually drowning her. The exact sequence of events remains unclear, but it is believed that the criminals used violence against Maria, knocked her down, and then drowned her in the sea, leaving her body behind. The attackers fled the scene, and the body was discovered by locals after being alerted by a young British woman who returned to help Maria. The community quickly organized their own investigation. Using the description provided by the British woman, they identified a man from surveillance camera footage taken at a nearby hotel, which showed a man walking down the street in wet clothes at night. The residents caught a suspect, and in their anger at his actions, they beat him, tied him up, and took him away. The police had to intervene and arrest the man. When they searched him, they found money and belongings that belonged to Maria. The suspects were later identified as Esquivel Cerdas and Mendoza Benavides. The police took Maria's body to the Costa Rican Center for Forensic Medicine to conduct the necessary tests to determine the cause of death. Although the exact results of the autopsy are still unknown, the investigation has found that the girl was abused before drowning. Maria's friend, who witnessed the incident, identified Esquivel Cerdas as one of the attackers, claiming that he had been harassing her. Both men were brought to court, where the forensic department charged them with premeditated murder and abuse of the British tourist. There were requests to detain the men, but they declared themselves not guilty. In the end, the court decided to impose a 3-month preventive detention order on Esquivel Cerdas, while Mendoza Benavides was released due to insufficient evidence connecting him to the crime. The Attorney General announced that although the man had been released, she planned to continue the investigation and would file a new appeal for his detention at a new hearing. News of Maria's death reached her relatives a few hours after the hotel manager contacted her sister via social media. She then called their mother to share the heartbreaking news. Maria's family quickly traveled to Costa Rica, where they were assisted by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in completing the necessary paperwork to repatriate her body. As news of Maria's tragic death spread on social media, many users commented and criticized her for traveling alone. However, others came to her defense. Friends, family members, and many outraged strangers rallied to support Maria, defending her against the unfounded accusations. Meanwhile, Santa Teresa residents, dressed in white, held a vigil in her honor and called for justice. People of all ages, including businessmen and tourists, came together for the White March, demanding an end to violence against women and improved security in the country. An altar was erected on the beach where her body was found. Flowers were placed in the sea, and Maria's songs were played. In an interview with a local radio station, Maria's mother broke down in tears and thanked the community for their outpouring of support in memory of her daughter. She shared that her family was deeply saddened. Tragically, Maria's vibrant life was cut short by the sea, which she loved so much. On August 9, her parents returned her body to Mexico. That same day, police arrested a third suspect, a 40-year-old craftsman named Sancho Rodriguez, as he was boarding a bus. Officers found scratches on his hands, and his brother's daughter identified him as one of the attackers. The Attorney General announced that Sancho must undergo a medical examination at the forensic department due to his injuries. Official records show that he was previously homeless until a neighbor provided him with housing, allowing him to rebuild his life. Several years earlier, he had faced charges from the Attorney General's office for crimes including burglary, armed robbery, and attempted murder. In September 2007, He was sentenced to nearly 13 years in prison and was released on March 26, 2017, after serving his sentence. A thorough investigation was conducted to identify the suspects and gather evidence of their involvement. It was later revealed that less than 24 hours before the tragedy involving Maria, another victim, a 30-year-old Spanish tourist named Arantxa Gutierrez Lopez, had been murdered in Tortuguero. Both crimes shocked Costa Rica, prompting many feminist groups to rally and demand government action to address these issues. Some protesters voiced their concerns about the country's inadequate security. A suitcase was brought to the square, bearing the names of Maria and Arantxa, the two victims of the violent attacks. Protesters lit candles, opened the suitcase, and wrote condolences on paper. In response, President Carlos Alvarado Quesada announced that he would allocate $1 million from the national budget each year to the Costa Rican Institute for Tourist Safety. He expressed his deep sorrow for the tragic events involving the girls, as well as the attacks on 2 Spanish tourists and 3 Costa Ricans in Rincón de la Vieja National Park. The tourism minister also addressed the situation, confirming the death of the foreign tourist and noting that an emergency meeting has been scheduled with the National Committee for Tourist Safety, which includes several organizations and business leaders. The tourism minister clarified that her department will increase support from the Ministry of Public Security to respond to crime in certain areas. They will focus on using technology to improve information sharing and will ensure that hotels have adequate safety materials. In addition, travel safety tips will be provided to tourists upon their arrival in the country. She stressed that despite the recent tragic events, tourism continues to grow in Costa Rica, which attracts about 3 million visitors a year, according to official statistics. On June 6, 2019, the prosecutor's office completed the investigation into Esquivel Cerdas and Sancho Rodriguez, who were charged in connection with Maria's death. On August 3, 2020, the trial took place. The prosecutor presented the case, noting that they only had witness testimony because the surveillance video did not record the event. More than 10 witnesses were scheduled to be questioned, but they refused to testify without providing a reason. The indictment states that Sancho attacked both girls with a sharp kitchen knife with the intention of robbing them. According to the prosecutor, he followed Maria while Esquivel Cerdas stole the British woman's belongings. Maria escaped and sought help. They believe that during this time, Sancho dragged Maria about 400 meters from the scene of the incident to avoid attracting attention. He then separated her and held her underwater until she suffocated. After committing the crime, he fled with the girl's mobile phone. The court heard a statement from Maria's mother, who was unable to attend the trial in person. In her written statement, she shared that her family life had been devastated by the tragedy and expressed her hope that the perpetrators would face severe punishment. She expressed her gratitude to all those who had helped and supported her, and she hoped that the defendants would be sentenced to at least 30 years in prison. The outcome of the case took everyone by surprise. On August 11, 2020, the Punta Arenas Criminal Court sentenced Esquivel Cerdas to 15 years in prison for abusing a British tourist who was accompanying Maria. Sancho Rodriguez was acquitted. In announcing the verdict, the judges stated that the evidence presented by the prosecution was insufficient to prove his guilt, leading to his release. The judge explained that although the time and place had been clearly established, the prosecution had not yet proven how the events occurred. Therefore, it could not be determined with certainty that Sancho was responsible for Maria's death. This decision angered not only Maria's family, but also many people in Costa Rica. In response, several feminist organizations organized a protest, collected signatures, and urged the prosecutor's office to appeal the ruling. Maria's mother expressed in an interview that the judge's decision meant that her daughter's death would go unpunished and allowed a cowardly criminal to escape responsibility. She was confused as to why the judge declared him innocent when she believed there was enough evidence against him. After the prosecutor's office announced that the trial would not be reopened, Maria's family was contacted. They informed her family that they had 15 days to file a private appeal against the appeals court's decision. However, Maria's mother chose not to pursue the case further. She felt that she had suffered too much and did not want to relive that traumatic experience. That night, the case sparked significant reactions both within Costa Rica and beyond. The outrage stemmed not only from the murder of a foreigner, but also from the perceived failure of the justice system. The tragic death of Maria, who passed away with her dreams unfulfilled, will always be remembered by her family and friends. The incident also highlighted the shortcomings of law enforcement agencies in protecting citizens and administering justice. The crime has prompted renewed discussions about the dangers women face when traveling alone. Social media has become a platform where some blame the victims rather than the criminals, while others speak out against the violence and call for better security measures. It is disheartening to note that Maria's family has not seen justice served. Her abusers and killers have never been imprisoned. Only one suspect is currently in prison, and it is not for Maria's murder. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Samantha Grigg. Youth is often a time of promise, a period when dreams, love, and aspirations are born. However, not all stories of youth are filled with light. Today, we will delve into a heartbreaking and haunting tale in which youth is not the beginning of good things, but rather the cause of an unforgettable tragedy. Just a couple of years before the events we will discuss, Samantha Grigg was living a typical teenage life. She had a remarkable vocal talent that could have launched her career. Yet, the day before her audition, her friend was found dead in the street, and she was accused of his murder. On the evening of February 15, 2014, a concerning call was made to the police in Bath, Michigan. A driver was traveling down the road when he noticed a young man lying motionless on the shoulder of the highway. Concerned for the young man's well-being, the driver stopped to help, but found that the man showed no signs of life. The driver immediately called 911 to report what he had found. The dispatcher sent emergency services to the location and guided the driver on how to provide first aid. The police and ambulance arrived at the scene around 10:30 p.m. They detected a faint pulse, and the medical staff began administering first aid, performed CPR, and rushed the young man to the hospital. Despite their efforts, the young man ultimately did not regain consciousness while in the hospital. The doctors did not find any clear reasons for the young man's death when they examined his body. A more thorough investigation was necessary. During the autopsy, the forensic pathologist discovered abrasions all over his body and head, which are common in cases where a person has fallen from a great height or been struck by a moving vehicle. Additionally, the victim had broken knuckles, and the most serious injury was a skull fracture that occurred in 2 places. He was soon identified, as he had identification documents with him. His name was Dustin Frolka, a 19-year-old from the nearby town of Owasso, Michigan. He came from a typical family with parents Sheriff Roca and Louis Hinka, who eventually separated. Dustin lived with his mother, but frequently visited his father and stepmother. In 2012, he graduated from high school and was a sophomore at Eastern Michigan University, where he was studying business management. Dustin has a daughter, but he and her mother are not married, live separately, and often have conflicts. Despite this, Dustin was thrilled about becoming a father and was committed to building a good future for his daughter. He balanced his busy career in music with his education and dedicated all his free time to her. Known by the stage name Dustin Joka, he was making strides in his music career and had recently signed a lucrative contract with a well-known music producer who believed in his talent. However, his close friends started to express concern for him as he began drinking more alcohol and smoking marijuana, which coincided with his rising career. His life seemed to be heading toward a tragic end. Dustin's legal troubles began in late January 2014 when he was arrested. As a result, he was expelled from his campus dormitory because he was considered a threat to other students, forcing him to move in with friends. Shortly before his death, he tweeted about trying a substance that acted like a hallucinogen, indicating a troubling mindset. Additionally, a large quantity of records related to illegal substances was found on his phone, raising further concerns about his well-being. The police seized and carefully examined all communications from Dustin. In their review, they found suspicious messages involving 3 teenagers who were arrested a week after the crime on February 22. The arrested individuals were 18-year-olds Tyrell Bredernitz and Samantha Grigg, and 16-year-old Brendan Heim. Samantha was arrested in her car, which was believed to have also been used in the commission of the crime. Thus, it was confiscated for a thorough examination. Upon inspection, traces of blood were discovered in the vehicle, supporting the police's belief that the deceased, Dustin, had been in that car. In Samantha's car, police found a folding knife that may have been used in the murder. When she was arrested, there was a strong smell of marijuana inside the vehicle. During the search, officers also discovered other banned substances, items belonging to the victim, and musical equipment. The other 2 suspects were arrested at their own apartments. All 3 teenagers were connected through their high school. Investigators found messages on their phones revealing that all 3 were involved in the events leading to the death of Dustin, a rising rap star. Samantha was a talented singer in a local rock band and had recently performed at the Summer Festival in 2012. She was known for her vibrant personality and rebellious spirit. Phone records indicated that she began communicating with Dustin a few weeks before he died. The investigation suggested that Samantha, along with the other teens, attacked Dustin to steal his banned substances. After the assault, they left him to die on the road. During the investigation, it was found that the criminals had destroyed most of the evidence by burning it. They drove out of town to dispose of the incriminating items, which made it impossible for investigators to find anything at the crime scene that indicated a murder had occurred. As a result, they could not accurately piece together what had happened. Despite this, there was enough evidence to charge the 3 teenagers with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit armed robbery. Each faced a potential life sentence for these charges. After interviewing them, investigators gathered enough evidence to detain the juvenile offenders. All 3 were charged with the specified crimes. Samantha was the first to accept a plea deal, pleading guilty to involuntary manslaughter and robbery without a weapon. In exchange for a lighter sentence, she agreed to testify against her accomplices, Brendan and Tyrell. This not only helped reduce her sentence, but also opened up the possibility of her being released early on parole. A key condition of her plea was that she had to provide truthful testimony about her accomplices. On the evening of February 15, Samantha received a call from Brendan. He asked her to give him and Tyrell a ride to East Lansing to break into Dustin's apartment. She simply agreed to drive them and planned to wait down the street for their return. However, when they arrived, they found no money in Dustin's apartment. Instead, they brought Dustin to Samantha's car and drove, stopping at ATMs so he could withdraw cash. At first, the situation seemed calm and non-violent, but as they neared Dustin's home, Brendan attacked him from the back seat, beating him severely. Dustin quickly realized he needed to escape. He jumped out of the moving car, which was traveling at about 100 kilometers per hour, after enduring several heavy blows to the head. He likely believed this desperate act was his only chance for survival. Samantha stopped the car, but not to help Dustin. Her accomplices got out, searched him, took his banned substances and around $800, and then kicked him. Afterward, the criminals drove away, leaving Dustin without any assistance. Samantha was paid $100 by the assailants to cover her gas costs for her involvement in the crime. The prosecutor stated that this plan had been detailed out on February 14 during a party. Although Samantha was not at the party, her friends called her and proposed that they attack Dustin. Under pressure from her friends, she agreed to go along with the dangerous scheme. At first, they described their intentions as vandalism and robbery, and nobody mentioned the plan to kill Dustin. The situation escalated only because he jumped out of the car. The lawyer claimed that until that point, Samantha had no significant legal issues. She was a student, a talented singer, and had the potential for a successful career in music. However, her true character was far from flawless. In addition to her involvement in the murder and robbery, police discovered banned substances and prescription medications in her car, indicating that she also struggled with substance abuse. Shortly before her legal issues began, Samantha had an audition lined up with a prestigious music company. However, because of the incident, she ruined her chances for a future career in music. During the trial, the defendant apologized to the family of Dustin, who were present in court, she admitting that she was the driver while Brendan and Terrell carried out the other criminal acts. Although she expressed regret, the victim's family did not believe in her sincerity. They felt that her role in the murder was just as important as that of the others, since she could have helped the victim or persuaded her friends to abandon their harmful plan. By not speaking up, she allowed this tragedy to unfold. At this time, Samantha could have called for help after separating from her friends if she had felt fearful of them. And if that had happened, Dustin might still be alive today. Instead, she chose to remain silent, resulting in a mother losing her son and a 10-month-old girl losing her father. When this was mentioned in court, Samantha nodded in agreement and wiped away her tears. Samantha shared her plans for after serving her sentence, expressing her desire to attend college to study music and promote her artistry while helping young people develop in the music industry. This only caused further pain for Dustin's family, who harshly criticized Samantha for depriving him of his future opportunities. The victim's family demanded the harshest punishment for Samantha's accomplice, even though it had not been proven that she was directly involved in the murder. Before the sentence was handed down, the judge read letters from concerned individuals. Some expressed that they believed Samantha should receive leniency, while others wanted her to spend her life in prison. One fan of Dustin even wished for Samantha to suffer eternally. Ultimately, Samantha was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 6 years. The victim's family agreed with this punishment, but hoped for a harsher sentence for Samantha. The prosecution, supported by the victim's family, believed her involvement in the crime was too serious for her to be forgiven and released. Samantha's best hope was to apply for parole when she turned 24. In contrast to Samantha, other accomplices faced more severe legal challenges. Tyrell was already known to law enforcement, who had visited his apartment at least 8 times in the 14 months before the murder. Each time, he could have been charged with minor offenses, but he managed to escape punishment. On December 3, 2013, Terrell was sentenced to 93 days in confinement for attempting to steal approximately $200 worth of property. The judge chose to give him a conditional sentence, hoping to avoid ruining his future. However, by January 13, 2014, he was back in court for multiple probation violations. Although the judge could have extended his sentence, he decided to wait until the next hearing on February 24. During the time between these court appearances, Tyrell committed a serious crime by killing Dustin. This incident sparked significant debate and anger. Many argued that if the judge had not been lenient with Tyrell, he would have been in jail, and Dustin might still be alive. The judge later explained that he wanted to give Terrell a chance to change, believing he could reform with guidance. Unfortunately, it became clear that Terrell was a danger to society, and this realization came too late, after the tragic death of Dustin. Interestingly, on February 12, only 3 days before this incident, A woman living in the apartment below him had contacted the police about him. That evening, she noticed the wind pushing trash onto her balcony and saw someone tossing it from the window above. When she went outside to check, she saw Terrell and his friends at the window. She complained to Terrell, who responded by throwing a beer bottle at her, narrowly missing her head. This incident alone could have landed Terrell in jail for violating the terms of his probation. Immediately after that, the officers assigned to investigate juvenile delinquency visited his apartment to look into the situation, but no one answered the door. The officers then returned to their patrol car nearby to wait for Terrell to come out. However, he did not appear that day. The charges against him were not serious enough to justify forcing the door open and arresting him. Consequently, the officers left without taking any action. A few days later, Dustin was murdered. The police returned to question Terrell, who initially denied any involvement. However, he later changed his story and agreed to cooperate with the prosecution in exchange for a lighter sentence. Terrell confessed to second-degree murder as part of a plea deal and also agreed to testify against his accomplices, shifting the blame onto his friend Brendan. Terrell explained that Brendan had planned to rob Dustin from the start and intended to attack him. Terrell was in the car with Brendan and Samantha when he witnessed Brendan pull out brass knuckles and begin hitting the victim, who was in the front passenger seat. After the attack, Dustin jumped out of the moving car and sustained fatal injuries. The car came to a stop, and the assailants got out to search for valuables on Dustin's body. Although Dustin was critically injured and still alive, they chose not to help him to avoid getting caught. Terrell claimed that Brendan instructed him to abandon the victim. Instead of offering assistance, they took some of Dustin's clothing, searching for money and valuables, including his shoes, and then fled the scene in Samantha's SUV. Terrell Bredernitz was sentenced to 38 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years, meaning he could apply for parole as early as age 43. 16-year-old Brendan Heim also accepted a plea deal after admitting to first-degree murder. Despite being the youngest involved, friends testified that he was the ringleader of the crime. Brendan revealed that on February 14, he planned the murder with two friends at his home. Their goal was to take Dustin, whom they knew had money, to several locations so he could withdraw cash from ATMs. It was Brendan's idea to start tormenting the victim in the car, and he quickly began to physically assault Dustin. Brendan expressed sorrow to the victim's family, but could not explain what drove him to commit the act. The investigation revealed that his mother had planned to seek help from a psychiatrist because she was concerned about his aggressive behavior. She and his father had observed that Brendan was acting unpredictably and wanted to ensure his well-being. However, his parents acted too late. Brendan Heim, who is 16 years old, received the most severe sentence, 60 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 32 years. The youngest participant in this crime was incarcerated as soon as he turned 18. Dustin's parents satisfied with Terrell and Brendan's sentence, but believed that Samantha's punishment was too lenient. They struggled to understand the senseless nature of the crime, which had destroyed their lives and the lives of everyone who loved the victim. To this day, all those involved in the crime remain in prison. It wasn't until a few months later, in July 2015, that a new figure emerged, Christopher John Foley, 18, who was charged with conspiracy to commit armed robbery and with covering up the murder of Dustin Frolka. Then, in January 2016, he was sentenced to 3 to 15 years in prison for conspiracy to commit armed robbery. During his trial, Foley expressed remorse and apologized to the victim's family, but his remorse did little to ease the pain experienced by Dustin Frolka's family. Although he did not directly participate in the attack and was not in the SUV when the crime was committed, Foley was convicted for his significant role in planning and assisting his co-defendants. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Sarah Cafferkey. Sarah Cafferkey was born on June 20, 1990, in Queensland, Australia. When she was young, her family encountered many financial difficulties, which caused tension between her parents. Eventually, her father found a better-paying job, and the family relocated to Bacchus Marsh, a suburb of Melbourne. However, moving house made the problems in her family increasingly serious. As a result, Sarah's parents are unable to mend their relationship, their disagreements leading them to realize that they cannot continue to be together. They decided to separate, and Sarah stayed with her mother. Despite their disagreements, both parents maintained a peaceful relationship to avoid affecting Sarah's life. The divorce proceedings concerning custody and property were handled amicably, as they both wanted to prioritize their daughter's well-being. At the time, Sarah and her mother lived in Bacchus Marsh, a town known for its green hills, farmhouses, and agricultural lands, where crime was rare. Even though she was an only child, Sarah never felt lonely, because they lived in a close-knit neighborhood. In her early years, it was easy for her to make friends thanks to her outgoing personality. When she wasn't with her mother, she spent time with her father in Queensland. However, as she grew older, she wanted to stay with her mother more to be closer to her friends. Due to her father's busy work schedule and his frequent visits to Bacchus Marsh to visit her, she had difficulty making friends in Queensland. Eventually, when Sarah was able to stay in Bacchus Marsh, she began visiting Queensland less often, much to her father's disappointment. Despite this, they maintained regular communication through phone calls, and her father occasionally came to visit. Both parents loved her and supported her throughout her life. When Sarah started elementary school, her mother chose the closest school, which was just a 10-minute walk from their home. There, she quickly made many friends. The route to school passed through a local swamp, a large flooded area with paths. This was the only short way for her to walk there. Along the way, she noticed an old house off to the side, unaware of how significant it would become in her life. Since first grade, Sarah has been very studious. She excelled in her studies and spent a lot of time on her homework after school. At the same time, she started participating in athletics and took part in competitions with other kids. She also started practicing karate and singing in the choir. She often expressed to her family that she wanted a brother or sister, but her mother wasn't ready for another child and declined. As a result, Sarah remained an only child. After finishing 10th grade, Sarah faced health challenges. She was diagnosed with asthma and was hospitalized, where doctors discovered that she had bronchial spasms that could escalate into serious attacks. This condition was dangerous because it could onset suddenly and lead to loss of consciousness. As a result, she had to limit her physical activities, withdraw from competitions, stop singing, and make frequent hospital visits. The main issue was the need to quickly recognize and manage potentially life-threatening attacks. This situation disrupted her plans, so much that she had to complete her final year of school through homeschooling. Due to ongoing hospital visits, she missed a substantial amount of the curriculum and struggled to catch up on missed topics. Thankfully, Sarah was diligent and determined not to give up. However, homeschooling posed significant challenges for her, leading to a loss of contact with many friends and limiting her social interactions. Despite this, she maintained regular communication and met with a few close friends. After finishing school, she had some free time and decided to get a job at a local bar. In 2011, she turned 21 and met a guy named Christopher Stewart. He seemed nice and caring, making Sarah feel happy. She believed he was the one she could spend her life with, and often shared this with her family and friends. However, her family was concerned about him from the start. They felt he was not as good as he appeared, but Sarah, infatuated with young love, ignored their warnings. Unfortunately, their concerns soon proved valid. After 2 months of dating, Christopher began to reveal a different side of himself. He had a bad reputation in the city, with rumors of using prohibited substances and possibly being involved in criminal activities. He started to manipulate Sarah, isolating her from her friends. Sadly, Sarah didn't realize it. He then began to create rifts between her and her family. Sarah once shared with her friend Ashley how she started using soft prohibited substances. Despite being persuaded not to, she found the experience captivating. Over time, she began to support her boyfriend more, which led her to drink more frequently and experiment with more powerful banned substances. By this time, he had completely replaced her friends with his group of friends, who were all living unhealthy lifestyles and were mostly substance addicts. Their home became a gathering place for various troubled individuals who would use prohibited substances for days on end. Sarah was in a difficult situation. Her friends realized that she is losing herself and try to help. However, she refused to leave Christopher. Despite this, she was starting to feel the negative effects of her substance use. She lost her job and realized she wanted to escape this harmful cycle. At one point, she attempted to detox at home, but it was unsuccessful. Eventually, she decided to check into a medical center for an addiction treatment program. After spending a week there, Sarah successfully completed the detox process and returned home. She underwent a remarkable transformation. The treatment had a positive impact on her. She even resumed her previous interests and aspirations. Now she was determined to finish her education, pursue a career as a lawyer, find a job, and travel. To successfully quit her addiction, Sarah needed to end her relationship with her addicted boyfriend, Christopher, who was a negative influence on her life. This wasn't the first time they had broken up, and he seemed indifferent to her decision, likely believing that they would get back together eventually. However, Sarah was committed to improving her life and was determined not to revert to her old ways. Eventually, Christopher understood that he couldn't win her back, which made him angry, and he began to stalk her. One day, while working at the bar, Christopher sent a 47-year-old man named Stephen James Hunter to meet Sarah. This was unusual because Stephen was not related to either of them. He had a bad reputation in the city as a cruel person linked to the criminal world, but these were just rumors, and no one had concrete evidence against him. Even though he scared her, she decided not to back down. During their conversation, Sarah got to know Stephen better. Gradually, they even started hanging out together. She described him as almost like a father figure to her, though it's unclear why such a close bond formed between them, despite their differences. At that time, Sarah's biological father lived in Queensland, and they kept in touch, which made Stephen's role in her life somewhat ambiguous. On November 7, 2012, Sarah, her friends, and Stephen were drinking together in the dormitory of a local educational institution where one of her friends was enrolled. The following day, Sarah and Stephen frequently exchanged text messages. On Friday, November 9, Sarah returned to her mother's house. She usually spent weekends with her family, but this time she had her own plans and went to visit a friend, promising to return by the end of the weekend. Sarah first stopped at a store, where she was captured on security cameras. Afterwards, she went to meet her mother on Saturday, but did not return home. By Sunday, there was still no news, and by Monday, she had not come back. Her mother became worried and reached out to several of Sarah's friends, who also had no idea where she was. The situation grew more concerning when it became clear that Sarah's car was missing along with her, indicating she had not returned home. There had been no problems in her family relationships, making it unlikely that she had run away, especially since she hadn't taken any belongings with her. The prolonged silence became increasingly suspicious. By Tuesday, November 13, there was still no word from her, so her mother contacted multiple news channels to report Sarah as a missing person. On that Tuesday, Sarah was supposed to attend her rehabilitation program, but she never showed up at the medical center. Sarah's parents began to worry about her disappearance and suspected that her ex-boyfriend, Christopher, might be involved. They questioned whether he could have kidnapped her or manipulated her in some way. Concerned for their daughter's safety, her mother contacted the police. The police quickly began their search. The first 48 hours were crucial, but they were missed, raising the possibility that Sarah might not be alive. Initially, the main suspect was her ex-boyfriend, Christopher Stewart, but he was soon cleared after investigators confirmed his alibi. The police then turned their attention to Stephen, a 47-year-old man who had a negative reputation in the community. Residents described him as having issues with self-control, anger, and legal troubles. A review of his criminal record has raised further concerns. He is known to be addicted to prohibited substances and is suspected of trafficking in prohibited substances. Several of Sarah's friends identified a man named Stephen as the last person who might have seen her alive. They believed that Sarah was visiting him. The police reached out to Stephen, who confirmed that he had seen Sarah on Saturday, November 10, when she arrived at his house near the swamp. They said goodbye that evening, as Sarah stayed behind while Stephen had to leave for a business matter, intending to return in a few hours. He stated that Sarah was supposed to wait at his house, which was near the swamp that she used to walk by on her way to school as a child. This area was a large marshy region surrounding her mother's house, and Stephen owned a small house there. On Sunday, when he returned, he found she was gone, and like everyone else, he was unable to contact her. Investigators arrived at the swamp and conducted a thorough inspection of the surrounding area, but found nothing suspicious. On November 15, the investigation progressed when police received a tip about Sarah's car. The vehicle was located parked in a small town called Morey Barron, about a half-hour drive from Bacchus Marsh. There was no connection between Morey Barron and Stephen, yet he remained a suspect. On November 17, police were granted a search warrant for Stephen's home, which was located near a swamp. When they opened the door, they were met with a pungent smell of decomposition. Inside the house, everything was in disarray, as if a struggle had occurred. Bloodstains were found in the garbage bins, various rooms, and on the stairs. Although they did not find a body, forensic scientists recovered several items from the dumpster, including a container of acid. The most notable item discovered by the police was a large green garbage can filled with concrete that had hardened quickly. Investigators immediately suspected that a body was inside. The trash was then sent to a lab for analysis, and the results confirmed their suspicions: a human body encased in concrete at the bottom of the bin. The body was compressed and deformed, indicating that it had been subjected to extreme pressure. It seemed that Stephen did not have time to dispose of the body and did not take into account that hiding the body in such a way would not mask the smell of death, which had filled the entire house. On November 20, 2012, Stephen was arrested for the murder of Sarah. During the initial interrogation, Stephen denied any involvement in the murder and also denied trying to hide the body. However, after being questioned harshly by detectives, he eventually broke down and provided his account of events, admitting to killing her. He explained that at around 7 p.m. on Saturday, November 10th, Sarah came to his house where they drank alcohol and used prohibited substances together. They then got into an argument, and in a fit of anger, she pushed Stephen and hit him in the chest. As a result, he lost control and attacked her, hitting her repeatedly in the head until she lost consciousness and fell to the floor. Stephen attacked Sarah with a hammer, causing fatal wounds to her skull and damaging her lungs and liver. Tragically, Sarah died from these injuries. Feeling lost and confused about what to do with Sarah's body, Stephen then turned to a friend. Because he was under supervision, he was determined to conceal his crime. Not wanting to face prison again, Stephen locked his house and returned with his friend. When he explained what had happened, his friend quickly distanced himself, insisting he wanted no part in the murder. Meanwhile, Sarah's body remained in a pool of blood on the kitchen floor. 2 days later, he wrapped Sarah's body in a bag, placed it in his car, and went to visit a friend named Timmy, where he confessed to the murder. At the party, Stephen asked his friend Timmy for help disposing of a body, specifically wanting to bury it. Timmy refused, expressing concern about getting into legal trouble, and suggested that Stephen turn himself in. Despite this, Timmy did not avoid the conversation. They even went to a coffee shop to grab a bite to eat, with the body still in Timmy's car. On their way back, Stephen bought a canister of hydrochloric acid, 3 bags of quick-drying cement, and a roll of black polyethylene film. After their meeting, they parted ways, and Stephen proceeded to carry out his plan, which involved encasing Sarah's body in concrete at his house in the swamp. He placed the body in the bottom of a plastic trash can and filled it with concrete. On November 14, Stephen returned to take Sarah's car and then drove to a nearby town, Morey Barron. He left the car there in hopes of confusing the investigation. During the investigation, it became clear that his negative reputation in the city was much worse than previously thought. Stephen had a long criminal history, and his life had been troubled from the start. He grew up in harsh conditions, under the abuse of his father, who bullied him and used a weapon to instill fear. His father once tied up his mother, threatening to shoot her, but he managed to call his grandparents for help. They were able to persuade his father to put the weapon down and free his mother. These traumatic experiences had a profound impact on Stephen, but they did not excuse his later actions. Even as a child, Stephen was already known to the police in his city. In 1983, when he was just 17 years old, he committed his first armed robbery. The police apprehended him and charged him, but due to his age, he avoided serious consequences. This was his first major crime. By 1986, at the age of 20, he was again in trouble with the law. He worked at a supermarket in a Melbourne suburb with an 18-year-old girl named Jacqueline, whom he had feelings for. However, she was not interested in him. Tragically, Stephen attacked Jacqueline, resulting in her death simply because she rejected his advances. He then disposed of her body, but never confessed to the crime in court. Despite his denial, the jury found him guilty, and he was sentenced to 16 years in prison. He served 13 years and was released in December. He was then 35, had spent most of his adult life in prison, and is now back in Australia. Jacqueline's family opposed the situation, convinced that Stephen was beyond rehabilitation and would continue committing crimes. Unfortunately, they could not prevent his release or impose any restrictions on him. In 2005, their worst fears came to fruition when Stephen returned to court for theft, assault, and trafficking in prohibited substances. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison but was eligible for parole after 4 years. After his release, Stephen moved to Bacchus Marsh, likely because few people there knew him. Some distant acquaintances helped him find a job in road service. However, he quickly resumed distributing illegal substances, with assistance from Sarah's ex-boyfriend, Christopher. While residents recognized him as a dangerous individual, they had no idea how dangerous he truly was. After serving another prison sentence, he was released on probation, which was scheduled to end on October 30, 2012. Just over a week after his release, Stephen murdered Sarah, making the public extremely angry. People began to feel unsafe, questioning a justice system that allowed dangerous criminals to roam free without serving their full sentences. On August 21, 2013, Stephen James Hunter was sentenced to life in prison. Normally, under Australian law, murderers can apply for parole. but Stephen was denied because of his prior criminal history involving murder. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Christy Sheets. Christy was born in 1974 in Decatur, Alabama, a city with a population of around 55,000. She was raised by her mother, Rebecca, a nurse who was a single parent. She attended Austin High School but did not graduate. At school, she was a member of a popular, exclusive teenage clique. It was during this time that she met Jason Sheets, who became the love of her life. Although they were both young when they met, they felt that they would be together forever. Jason Sheets was born in Lawrence County, Alabama, and graduated from East Lawrence High School in Trinity, just 15 minutes from Christy's home. He was an exceptional baseball player, very intelligent, and well-liked. Over time, Jason and Christy became the perfect couple. They married in the mid-90s and later moved to Fort Worth, a city in north-central Texas. There they welcomed two beautiful daughters, Taylor, born in 1994, and Madison, born in 1999. When their eldest daughter, Taylor, was in second grade, the family moved to Fulshear, a quiet suburb in Texas in the southern United States. They were a middle-class family, thanks in large part to Jason's income as a technology consultant at an oil and gas company in Houston. He graduated in 1993 with a degree in mathematics and began his career as a software developer at various companies. Christy, on the other hand, did not have a stable job. She worked as an executive assistant and vice president at a transportation company, and also as a stylist in a beauty salon. In 2015, she took a job as a receptionist at a laser hair removal clinic in Houston. John Hollis, the clinic manager and Christy's boss, sometimes viewed her as a problem employee, with an unstable personality. Christy has an easy-to-listen Southern accent, which often brings a sense of comfort to customers. However, when there were no customers, she would become different and somewhat sad. Eventually, her boss decided to fire her, which caused her to go through a difficult and painful period. As for Christy and Jason's daughters, they are Madison and Taylor. The eldest, Taylor, is a kind and thoughtful young girl. She has many friends and is trusted by those around her. One friend called her a beautiful soul, highlighting her sweetness and kindness. Taylor often babysat for neighbors and even tutored their children in various subjects. For 6 months, she worked at a preschool, where everyone recognized her natural talent for connecting with kids. During this time, she also taught the boys sign language, which she had learned independently. Besides, Taylor is also a talented and creative artist with a great passion for art. She started dating Juan Sebastian in 2011, and the two got engaged in 2013. Meanwhile, Madison, Taylor's younger sister, is a cheerful and positive girl who always brings joy to everyone around her. Since the age of 14, Madison has been a nanny in her spare time. Taylor and Madison had a wonderful time together. They never fought and truly loved each other. Their father, Jason, also cherished his daughters, and they spent a lot of time together. Christy, their mother, adored her daughters. Madison and Taylor, who were everything to her, they were her reason for living. Christy spoke proudly about her girls, frequently sharing their photos on social media as a testament to her love. 2 years earlier, on Mother's Day in 2013, Taylor shared a heartfelt tribute to her mom, Christy, on Facebook. She praised her mother for being incredibly generous, always prioritizing her family without expecting anything in return. Additionally, she described her mother as one of the strongest people she knows, having faced many challenges in life, but always showing love and devotion to her daughter. However, beneath that happy exterior, Christy is struggling with emotional problems. In 2012, Christy lost her grandfather, who had been her main support and mentor, marking the beginning of her emotional decline. Just 2 months later, Christy's mother passed away, leading her to battle severe depression. This condition became so overwhelming that she attempted to end her life 3 times by taking large doses of medication and began drinking excessively. Over time, Christy required ongoing treatment for depression and anxiety, spending the next 4 years in 3 different private psychiatric hospitals. Her life became chaotic, and she even lived separately in a rented apartment away from her family. For Christy, her husband Jason is not only her greatest love, but also her rock during difficult times. Unfortunately, their relationship began to deteriorate. Since 2012, they faced marital issues due to Christy's emotional struggles, leading to multiple breakups. In 2016, Jason decided to move out, believing that divorce was the only solution. By this point, it was clear that the situation in their family was not good. Between 2012 and 2016, police visited their home at least 14 times, due to family disputes and requests for assistance. Following these incidents, a specialized police team was assigned to monitor the family. Additionally, the Sheriff's Department's crisis management team intervened. In one 911 call in November 2015, someone requested police assistance to check on their home, as they had heard that the occupants might be intoxicated. However, it turned out that the issue was a verbal argument between Jason and Christy, with no physical violence involved. An important part of Christy's personality was her strong support for the right to bear arms. Although she applied for a weapon license, the state denied her request due to her mental health history. Nevertheless, she inherited a weapon from her maternal grandfather. The presence of weapons in the house made Taylor feel uneasy. She confided in a childhood friend that it caused her anxiety, especially given her mother, Christy's mental health issues. On Friday, June 24, 2016, Jason celebrated his 45th birthday. He spent most of the day with one of his daughters and communicated with Christy about the next step in their relationship. He was considering officially ending the relationship. When he got home, he found Christy sitting in the backyard and informed her that he had decided to file for divorce. Christy had difficulty accepting that her life would never be the same again, and no one could predict what would happen next. Jason went to the other side of the house, and then Christy called a family meeting. He thought this meeting would be to announce their divorce. Around 5 p.m., Jason and Christy started arguing again as everyone gathered in the main room. Jason could no longer hold back and finally expressed what had been on his mind. He wanted a divorce. He told Christy that this would be the last birthday he would let her ruin. The tension escalated. The argument intensified because Christy was angry with Taylor for supporting their divorce. Christy decided to punish Taylor by forbidding her from seeing her boyfriend, even though they were supposed to get married the following Monday. Jason disagreed with Christy, finding it unreasonable to punish Taylor. As soon as the situation escalated, Christy suddenly grabbed her maternal grandfather's weapon from under the couch cushion and pointed it at Jason. She accused Jason of forcing her to do the act and insisted he should suffer the consequences. Jason was extremely scared and begged her not to take action. Amidst her chaotic emotions, Madison managed to call 911 for assistance. Meanwhile, Jason desperately begs Christy not to pull the trigger, urging her to think of their daughter. He assured her they would do anything she wanted, but Christy, clearly agitated, replied that it was too late. During the call to emergency services, screams could be heard from Jason and their daughters. One daughter cried out, "Please don't do this. Forgive them. Don't do it." But her pleas were ignored by her mother, Christy. As Jason tried to calm Christy, she began attacking Madison and Taylor. By that time, the police were already en route. Jason ran behind the couch, trying to help his daughters escape, but it was too late. Christy attacked Madison in the neck. As Madison attempted to flee out the front door, she lost consciousness and died from her injuries. Christy then pursued Taylor, who was also injured and trying to escape. In that moment, Taylor reached out to 911, struggling to explain the situation and mention her injury, but the dispatcher could only hear sounds of distress before the call abruptly ended. The neighbors were in shock at what was unfolding. One of them attempted to call 911 and explain the situation. The neighbor reported that two individuals had wounds from weapons and that a woman with a weapon was coming out of her house. Later, the neighbor stated that the people involved in the shooting lived next door and that he was trying to safeguard himself and his family because the armed woman was still outside. Christy then attacked Taylor again, who was lying in the middle of the street as neighbors watched in shock from their homes. At the same time, Jason ran to the end of the street, calling for help. Throughout the incident, Christy appeared calm and emotionless. In total, she inflicted 3 wounds on Taylor's head and back. At this point, the police arrived on the scene. They ordered Christy to surrender her weapon, but she refused. In response, one of the officers attacked her, ending her life. A helicopter transported the critically injured Taylor to Texas Medical Center, where she later died from her injuries. Jason was not attacked during the incident, but he was taken to a medical facility because he was in shock and unable to process what had happened. A few days later, Taylor and Madison were laid to rest at the Memorial Cemetery in Decaturina, Alabama. This tragic case has garnered significant attention in the United States, particularly after authorities released the emergency calls made by Taylor and Madison during the attack. Friends and family were shocked, as they viewed Christy and her children as a happy family without any apparent issues. Many questioned what could have driven Christy to commit such a horrific act, and why she would deliberately kill her own daughters. Jason was devastated by the loss of his daughters at the hands of his wife. A few days after the tragedy, he told the police that Christy seemed intent on making him suffer. Despite having the opportunity, she did not harm him. Jason believed she wanted him to live with the pain of her actions, which led him to conclude that her motive for killing their daughters was to inflict suffering on him. This suggested that Christy was determined to kill their daughters that day. Evidence supporting this theory includes her hiding the weapon between the sofa cushions, indicating she planned to gather the family and then use the weapon. A friend mentioned that she always sensed something would happen, but she never expected Christy to take such action, describing Christy as toxic to the family. Because people loved Madison and Taylor, their tragic fate caused pain for many. This case continues to shock people because despite Christy's emotional struggles, she had no history of violence or aggressive behavior. Almost a week after the attack, Jason shared a series of photos of his daughters, Madison and Taylor, on Facebook. In September 2016, Jason gave a television interview where he stated that the power of God helped him cope with the loss of his daughters. He expressed that he had nothing positive to say about Christy, as his love for her had faded long ago. Although he felt immense sadness, he spoke calmly about how he could never escape the memories of that day. The story of Christy's family is still heartbreaking to hear. It serves as another reminder of the underlying mental health issues, but no one could have predicted the outcome. Christy turned her deep love into hate, leading her to kill her own daughters. Her actions were meant to ensure that her husband would suffer a lifetime of painful memories. Truly horrifying. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Raynella Dossett Leith. Raynella Dossett Leith was born on October 25, 1948 in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, a small isolated town originally established for workers at the nearby nuclear power plant. Her parents worked at the plant, and because the town was isolated, it was safer than many other American cities. Children were free to play outside. Raynella was a bright student and did well in school. She successfully enrolled at East Tennessee State University in Knoxville, where she studied nursing. There, she met a very ambitious young man named Ed Dossett, who aspired to become a corporate executive or start his own business, and even had political ambitions. He was a quiet, friendly young man, and they both grew up in rural Tennessee. In 1970, the young couple got married and moved to the suburbs of Knoxville. Ed Dossett owned a large old family farm that they renovated with the help of contractors, turning it into the perfect home. After graduating from college, Raynella began working as a nurse at a local hospital and worked her way up to the position of senior nurse. By 1975, she had completed her law degree and begun a successful legal career. In 1978, when the Knoxville County Attorney General retired, Ed Dossett ran for the position and was elected. Raynella played a major role in his success, as he credited much of it to her support. In 1978, the couple welcomed their first daughter. In 1983, they had a son, followed by another daughter in 1985. After learning that she was pregnant with her first child, Raynella decided to quit her job and become a full-time housewife, as her husband had a good income, and she also helped with the farm work. During this time, Ed Dossett served as the Knoxville County Attorney and worked with a secretary named Kay Clift Walker, with whom he had a secret affair. Although Kay had a family of her own, they still spent weekends and holidays together. When Kay became pregnant, she had to quit her job due to her increased responsibilities, but her intimate encounters with Ed Dossett continued. In such a conservative county, having an extramarital relationship was unacceptable for a public servant. Ed Dossett and Kay chose to end their affair to avoid damaging their reputations. However, the situation was more complicated than it seemed. Those who knew Raynella recognized her as a controlling and powerful person. People often did not enjoy interacting with her, let alone befriending her. Ed Dossett's close friends and family knew that his marital problems began soon after they got married, largely due to Raynella's desire to control every aspect of their lives. Many later understood why Ed Dossett decided to leave. During a meeting, Ed Dossett began to experience severe stomach pain. His assistant noticed that he was constantly holding his stomach and seemed unwell. When asked about his health, Ed Dossett expressed that he believed his wife was trying to harm him, implying that she was poisoning his food. However, when offered help, he insisted that he could handle it on his own. By September 1991, his condition had worsened to the point that he had to be hospitalized. Although he was skeptical of his wife's intentions, he later revealed that these fears were unfounded. Doctors performed a series of tests and discovered a malignant tumor in his small intestine and liver. Unfortunately, the cancer was already at an advanced stage, with metastases spreading to nearby organs in the abdominal cavity. Ed Dossett returned home anxiously and shared his diagnosis with Raynella. He later confided to family members that she responded calmly to the news but chose not to discuss the illness. She believed it was better to keep the situation private, thinking it would allow her husband to continue working for as long as possible. She felt that staying active would help prolong his life, and secretly hoped for a miracle that would aid in his recovery. Those who knew Raynella well speculated that her motives were financial, believing she pushed him to work until the end to maintain a steady income. By March 1992, Ed Dossett's health had declined significantly, and it was clear he was losing the battle against his illness. During this time, he wanted his family close, so he contacted loved ones, including his cousin, with whom he had a close relationship until the end of his life. The cousin lived in another state and drove over 700 kilometers to visit Ed Dossett. Raynella refused to let his cousin into the house, leaving him no choice but to leave. That evening, Raynella wrote a letter explaining her actions, claiming that Ed Dossett's serious condition made it impossible for him to receive visitors anymore, and that his appearance might scare them. However, no one found this explanation convincing. Just a few days later, Ed Dossett himself asked his family to visit him one last time, indicating that he did not care about his appearance. The next day, Raynella insisted that Ed Dossett return to work. Despite being in excruciating pain and barely able to move, Ed chose to follow his wife's wishes and continue working until the very end. After only one day of work, he was forced to stop. Now bedridden, Ed Dossett was on near constant morphine to manage his unbearable pain, and doctors estimated he had only a few weeks to live. No one expected anything unusual to happen to Ed Dossett, who was in critical condition and required medical assistance to stay alive. On the morning of July 9, a 911 call was received requesting police and paramedics to Raynella's home for assistance. When the police arrived, they found Raynella in a panic, running around the body of Ed Dossett, who was lying on the ground. Raynella explained that her husband had gone out to check on their cattle. After a while, she heard noises indicating that the cattle were agitated. She tried to call out to Ed Dossett, but there was no response. Fearing he had been trampled by the frightened animals, she grabbed her pistol and fired several shots into the air to scare them away. Initially, the police believed the incident to be an accident. Raynella was taken to the police station for standard questioning. However, as the conversation progressed, her account of her husband's death began to raise suspicions. During the questioning, the police learned that Ed Dossett had a serious illness and had suddenly wanted to check on the cattle, which seemed odd given his poor health and difficulty walking. The police were puzzled as to why Raynella had allowed him to go alone to the herd in such a weakened state, and why she had shown no concern when he took so long to return. Raynella remained in the house until she heard a loud noise, at which point she discovered her husband lying on the ground. Ed Dossett had been trampled and was covered in scratches and hoof marks. Raynella administered first aid and CPR. Having worked in a hospital, she was well versed in these techniques, but unfortunately, nothing seemed to help. As her story unfolded, more bizarre details emerged. Realizing her husband was beyond saving, she called for emergency services, but there was no response. She tried to contact the local hospital directly, but she did not remember their phone number. The police found this suspicious, as she had worked as a senior nurse at a local health center for many years and should have known the number by heart. Despite the inconsistencies, her account was considered credible. She explained that she had not been working for the organization for long and had forgotten the necessary phone numbers. She also mentioned feeling scared and shocked. Eventually, she contacted the local market director, a friend of hers, and asked him to call for help. He then reached out to the emergency services. Unfortunately, the condition of the body made it difficult to determine the cause of death at first glance, so a thorough autopsy was required. Forensic experts arrived to investigate the scene, but they found no physical evidence. Ultimately, Ed Dossett's death was ruled an accident, and the case was closed. However, the real story was just beginning. Those who knew Ed Dossett well realized that in his final days, he was barely conscious for more than a few minutes due to constant pain and required injections of morphine to relieve it. It was strange that he suddenly decided to leave the house to check on the cows. If he tried to stand, he could barely do so on his own. His legs had weakened in the last days of his life. The medical examiner found numerous internal injuries and broken bones on the man. Furthermore, there were hoof marks on his skin, which corroborated Raynella's story. Ed Dossett's relatives knew that his life insurance policy included a clause that doubled the payout if he died in an accident rather than from natural causes such as cancer. Although his wife would still receive a payout, it would be significantly less. Therefore, it was in her best interest to present her husband's death as an accident. Since the authorities classified his death as an accident, she could collect double the compensation. This is why Raynella initially tried to hide her husband's illness from the police. Ed Dossett's relatives decided to investigate the circumstances surrounding his death. Discovering inconsistencies in the case, Ed Dossett's blood had almost no morphine, which was surprising given his regular use of high doses. He had terminal cancer and could only manage his pain with large amounts of painkillers. The forensic expert confirmed that the morphine level was 0, indicating that he had not taken any medication for at least a day. However, it seemed that Ed Dossett could not move without painkillers. Despite this, the official inquest was closed. It is believed that Ed Dossett may have staged his own death, as he was nearing the end of his life and wanted to go on his own terms. Perhaps he was worried about his family and considered this his last wish. But it is difficult to understand why he did not at least take a painkiller to alleviate his suffering before staging this incident. All of this creates a confusing picture with contradictory details. At the funeral, Ed Dossett's friends confirmed their suspicions about Raynella. Eyewitnesses noted that she seemed carefree and even cheerful, which was surprising for a grieving widow. Rather than mourning her husband, she appeared to treat the event as a social gathering, mingling and chatting with guests. This behavior was especially strange given her usual rudeness toward others following her husband's death. It seemed that she had finally been relieved of the burden of caring for him. She had not worked for a long time, had received a large sum of money, and felt no need to find employment. Instead, she chose to spend most of her time with her children. However, Raynella soon grew tired of this lifestyle. She and her children began visiting a nearby swimming pool owned by a man named David Lead. David was a well-known figure in the local community. He was married and had a daughter. Raynella and David had little in common. Raynella was well-educated, while David had dropped out of school at 19 without graduating. He eventually became a hairdresser and opened his own beauty salon, gaining recognition in town. David was always proud of his appearance and underwent several cosmetic surgeries to look younger. Unfortunately, his satisfaction with his looks did not last long. One day, an accident caused a large piece of debris to hit his eye, disfiguring his face and leaving him partially blind. Since then, he has worn sunglasses. As Raynella and her children spent more time at the pool, they grew closer to David. He began an affair with Raynella, which his wife eventually discovered. She filed for divorce, but by then, David was deeply in love with Raynella and indifferent to the divorce proceedings. They quickly divorced, and in January 1993, Raynella married David. He moved to her farm just 6 months after Ed Dossett's death, which sparked new rumors and gossip in the community about her marrying her late husband's friend, especially considering the suspicious circumstances surrounding Ed Dossett's death. The situation became a real scandal. Initially, she and David ignored the questions and gossip, but eventually, the rumors died down. Soon after, she began to display her domineering and harsh personality. David's daughter, who had seen him driving his pickup truck in a bad mood, asked her father what had happened. He told her that he had argued with Raynella, but did not want to share more details. His daughter was shocked, as it was the first time she had seen him like that. In 1994, a heartbreaking tragedy struck Raynella. Her son died tragically. He and his sister had been driving with a temporary license that allowed them to drive as long as a licensed adult was present. However, that day, the boy was driving without adult supervision, lost control of the car, and crashed into an oncoming vehicle. The boy, who was not wearing a seatbelt, was thrown through the windshield and suffered serious injuries, dying before the ambulance arrived. Raynella was taken to the police station for questioning after the incident. Several witnesses stated that there were no adults in the car when the boy was driving, but Raynella claimed she was in the car with the children and that the tragic accident happened before she could react. Despite this, the police believed Raynella's story and chose not to prosecute her. If the case had been thoroughly investigated, Raynella could have faced consequences that could have prevented further events from occurring. However, her persuasive speaking skills helped her avoid further legal trouble. Following these events, divorce proceedings began between Kay Clift Walker, Ed Dossett's former secretary, and her current husband, Steve Walker. Her husband was shocked to discover that their second child with Kay was actually Ed Dossett's. Raynella, who knew about the affair, contacted Steve to discuss the situation. The day after they met, she requested another meeting to discuss important documents. Raynella invited Steve to her farm to review the documents confirming the paternity of all of Kay's children with Ed Dossett. In a shocking turn of events, Raynella pulled out a loaded pistol and began attacking Steve. Fortunately, he dodged the bullets and escaped unharmed. Steve considered calling the police for assistance, but Raynella acted first and called them herself. In a panic, she falsely claimed that Steve had brought a weapon to her home and threatened her. The police quickly discovered the truth, leading to Raynella being charged with attempted murder. After a preliminary hearing, she was released on $200,000 bail. Raynella later accepted a plea deal, which resulted in a sentence of 6 years of probation and 100 days of community service. Meanwhile, Raynella continues to research her inheritance after David's death. His daughter, who was only entitled to 10% of the estate, was supposed to inherit the house and the rest of the estate. In January 2000, David began to suffer from various health problems, including hallucinations, high cholesterol, and even a stroke. Raynella handled the situation by preventing family members from visiting David and limiting contact with his daughter and their nephew. Fortunately, David recovered and was discharged from the hospital, but his health problems forced him to quit his business. By this time, he was showing signs of dementia. During a visit to a neurologist, he vaguely recalled an incident involving suffocation with a pillow, but the neurologist dismissed it as another hallucination. On March 13, David's mother was hospitalized for cancer. Unexpectedly, Raynella visited her at the hospital and then contacted David's daughter, asking her to visit her father. She expressed that she had left a plate of food and medicine on the bedside table, but was worried that David might not finish eating. It was unclear why she suddenly became so anxious, and how she knew he had even touched the food. The call was strange because, in recent months, Raynella had done everything she could to limit David's daughter's contact with her father and prevent them from communicating. Additionally, she had never visited her mother-in-law, so her appearance at the hospital took everyone by surprise. David's daughter then went to the house to check on her father, but no one answered her phone calls or opened the door. She eventually found David with a head injury and quickly called the police. When the police arrived, they found Raynella immediately discussing her decision to end David's life. She insisted he had good reasons for this, citing his long-term battle with depression. However, David loved his daughter very much, and his mental health seemed stable because he was managing his illness well. Raynella told the police that on the day he died, she had left him food on the bedside table before visiting her mother-in-law. Before leaving, he had spoken to her and kissed her goodbye. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it, but now she realized that was his way of saying goodbye to her for the last time. Raynella claimed that David's actions constituted a voluntary departure from life, but she also mentioned that it was the first time she had seen a weapon. However, given her dubious past full of lies and contradictions, few believed her. There were some strange details in this case. At the crime scene, 3 shots were fired. The first missed, the second was fatal, and the third also missed David. Additionally, 1 shot came from a different type of weapon that was not found at the crime scene. David was wounded on the left side of his head, despite being right-handed and having lost most of his vision in his left eye due to a previous traffic accident. This suggests that he would have struggled to aim accurately at that part of his head. David's family believes that Raynella was responsible for the murder. It seemed that the Raynella might eventually be brought to justice, but she acted quickly by arranging for the cremation of her second husband, David. This move destroyed much of the evidence that could have been used in court, making it impossible to conduct a proper autopsy. David's daughter was devastated by her father's death and even more shocked to discover that he had left her virtually nothing. Despite efforts to bring the police into the case, 3 years passed without any progress. Raynella manipulated those around her with her money and status, and she lied to the police several times. Finally, in 2006, when David's daughter realized that she could not obtain justice through government agencies, she decided to hire a private investigator. Her goal was to seek justice and prevent Raynella from gaining an undeserved inheritance from David. She was certain that her father would never do this to her. It was all a setup. Private investigators uncovered clear evidence of Raynella's guilt, leading to the reopening of the official investigation into David's death. The police finally took the evidence against Raynella seriously and thoroughly examined the cases surrounding the deaths of her 2 husbands. The toxicology report on Ed Dossett's death revealed an error. In fact, there was a dangerously high level of morphine in his system, which could have been fatal. With such a high concentration of the painkiller, he would not have been able to move, let alone care for his cows. In 2006, Raynella was charged with the murder of Ed Dossett. It became clear that his death was no accident. She had discreetly contacted a funeral home and paid for her second husband's cremation, raising suspicions that she was trying to hide the evidence. As a result, Raynella faced charges of premeditated murder. However, she portrayed herself as the victim, convincing several people in the process and manipulating the trial in her favor. Raynella did not plead guilty to the murder. She was released on $5,000 bail, and her formal trial was set for March 2009. The jury was unable to reach a unanimous decision, with only one juror believing she was innocent, while the others believed she had planned to kill her husband for financial gain. As a result of this impasse, the case was retried in 2010. During the retrial, experts revealed that the bullet that killed David Leith was fired from a distance of at least 30 centimeters, too far for a suicide attempt. David did not have the arm length necessary to wield a weapon at that distance. Fingerprints found on the murder weapon also suggested that the scene had been staged after the crime. Raynella visited David's mother at the hospital to establish an alibi. She tried to contact David's daughter, locate her father, and call the police. The prosecutor argued that David had been given a cocktail of drugs typically used for surgical patients, which only nurses had access to. On January 25, 2010, after 2 days of deliberations, a jury found Raynella Dossett Leith guilty of first-degree murder for David's death. She was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 50 years. Shortly after the verdict, charges related to the death of Raynella's first husband, Ed Dossett, were dismissed for reasons that remain unclear. In early 2011, it was discovered that the verdict had been entered while the judge was a drug addict, which may have influenced the outcome. On the plus side, David's will was found to be invalid because his illness had impaired his mental capacity. As a result, half of the estate was confiscated, and Raynella returned David's assets to his daughter. Her lawyers attempted to appeal the case, but their efforts were unsuccessful. The defense continued to fight and achieved a breakthrough in January 2017, when Raynella returned to court. The prosecution argued that Raynella's murder plan fell apart when she fired the first shot, which dramatically changed the situation. The second shot was believed to be the fatal one. David's daughter testified that Raynella had been acting strangely and unusually on the day of the incident. The prosecution contended that Raynella's odd behavior was an attempt to create an alibi for herself. Steve Walker, Kay's husband, who had been attacked by Raynella earlier, also spoke at the trial. He stated that Raynella clearly intended to kill him and even shouted about her intentions. He believed that he was only saved by luck. He was furious that Raynella had escaped punishment and that she believed she could act without consequences. It appeared that Raynella picked up the weapon again and attacked her second husband. To further support her claim that David had taken his own life, the defense brought an expert into the courtroom. The defense expert demonstrated to the jury how David Leith could have fired all 3 shots. Ultimately, the judge acquitted Raynella Dossett Leith, stating that there was no evidence to prove her guilt. She noted that no blood or gunpowder residue was found on David's body, and that Raynella had an alibi for the time of his death because she was in the hospital. There was no evidence to prove that Raynella committed the crime or that she was the last person to see David alive. The defense celebrated the verdict, while the prosecution and jury were disappointed. Raynella, who has repeatedly evaded the justice system, remains free. Now 76, she lives on her farm, and no one dares to question her about the deaths of her 2 husbands. Her children support her. Unfortunately, it seems the truth about these tragic deaths will never be discovered, but many believe she was directly involved in the deaths of both husbands.